I will flog myself later, and that means like not, not.
Yes.
Hang on a
I
minute.
got
Let's
you. I
just
got
wait.
you. I got you.
Edit that.
I am not. I am not. Hey guys, welcome to the Video Express, where we dust off old VHS tapes and discuss all things horror, sci-fi, and exploitation. I'm Matt,
And I'm Katie.
and we want to introduce a very special guest on tonight's show. With us is none other than the writer and director of the Wolfman's Got Nars documentary and the leader of the Monster Squad, Andre Gower.
That's me. Hey guys,
That
Hi.
is you.
that is me. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. We're so excited to have you here today, Andre.
Likewise, just excited to be here myself. It's always fun.
All right, so let's go ahead and just pick up and get things rolling. Katie, tell our fine listeners what movie we're spotlighting on tonight's episode.
So tonight we are talking about Urban Legends Final Cut, the 2000 slasher sequel to the classic slasher from 1998, directed by John Ottman. And here's a quick little synopsis. A film student vying for the coveted Alfred Hitchcock Award at her university decides to make a horror movie about a serial killer who uses urban legends as inspiration for his murders. After the film program's star pupil allegedly kills himself, his twin brother arrives in town and assists our protagonist in unraveling the mystery around his brother's death. As production continues on her movie, members of her crew start disappearing mysteriously, and she soon starts to suspect that someone is coming for her next.
Ooh.
Yes.
There you go.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, well, you know what? Before we dive into all the nitty gritty of Urban Legends Final Cut, Katie, why don't you tell us what's going on today in the cinema world?
All right, so we have a couple of birthdays to announce just fresh out the gate here. So Pet Sematary turns 32 years old today. So today is April 21st, 2021, and it's Pet Sematary's birthday. So we'd like to wish that movie a happy birthday. That's one of my personal favorites. And then another birthday we have is Silent Hill turns 15 today, released in 2006, which if anybody's been listening to this podcast, you'll know that era is one of my favorite eras of horror, because that was when I came of age. So Silent Hill was definitely one of my favorites growing up as well. So happy birthday to that. And then I only have one movie recommendation today, although there's a lot of really cool stuff coming out on Shudder in March and April. But specifically, I wanted to talk about next Monday, April 26th, Shudder is dropping part 2 of the In Search of Darkness documentary series. This is it explores and reflects on horror films from the 1980s, and they break it down year by year. So the first one was like 4 hours long, and I'm pretty sure this one is too. And Andre, you were actually a part of this series.
I am, which is awesome. When David, the director of In Search of Darkness, hit me up and was like, "Hey man, would you like to come in, to the office and sit down, part of this doc?" And I had known about this doc, I don't know, probably for a year or so, because it was wide open on social media and with people that were involved in it. And I was like, "Did you not get like anybody else? Like you need me to come in? Like I've seen the roster of the people that you have." Already, sitting down. It's like, did like you lose all their footage and you need some like, some fill-ins? And Dave was like, "No, man, you got to come in and talk about your stuff, because you always say, some interesting things, and obviously the Monster Squad connection, and talk about that era, because you're literally part of that." And I was like, "Well, damn it, yeah, I guess you're right." So it was awesome. I went and sat down at his office, and we chatted probably for a couple hours, and it's funny because it was so long before the first one came out that I don't even remember like everything we talked about. And then it came out and everybody's like, I love it, and Andre Gower, and they hit me up. I'm like, oh my god, did I just like I'm in it? Like I made the cut? Like did I make a total doof out of myself? Like, what did we talk about? And the only thing I remember from the beginning was that we talked about Jaws in 3D, and I hope I didn't piss anybody off.
Yeah, it's a really great documentary series. I definitely recommend anybody who who loves 80s horror, or who maybe, especially people who just want to learn more about 80s horror, like bring a notepad, because this is comprehensive. Like it goes into detail of just year by year. So yeah, definitely check that out. Coming to Shudder next Monday, April 26th.
Yeah, I think if you put the two together, and I think there's a third, but they're working on the 80s sci-fi docs. That's a whole
Oh
other
my
thing.
gosh.
But like if you did just the first two, that's like a textbook. That's like an entire semester worth of work, like you said. So
Yeah.
take notes and hope you pass the final exam.
Yeah.
All right, Katie, you got anything else for us in the cinema
That's
world?
it. I kept it light today.
All
That's it.
right.
A 4-hour doc is not
Yeah,
light. You're
that's true.
enough.
Yeah,
That's
the
good.
4 hour. Yeah. I did recommend 4 hours of content. So
This is true. All right, well, fuck it. You know what? Let's do this, guys. Let's get into tonight's movie. Let's get into Urban Legends Final Cut. Andre, this was your first time viewing, right?
It was. I had seen the first one, years and years ago when it came out. Never saw Final Cut, even though I knew about it, and I know some people in the movie. And then there's some other weird kind of tie-ins that Matt, you and I were kind of joking about before we started recording. Yeah, well, I think first off, it's very representative or indicative of I think what everybody was trying to do in the 90s, especially in this space, and especially with something that was trying to be franchisable, which was a word back then too. It's like obviously we have all these horror movies and you try to make franchises out of them. There's been some great follow-ups or serviceable follow-ups. There's been some terrible follow-ups to original ideas, and sometimes the follow-ups are a little bit better than the original. I always love when that happens, right? um but this was if you can get yourself out of, if you are over 30 and you can get yourself out of the very 90s just
Yeah.
aroma of this movie, it's literally bathed in like Axe body spray and turtlenecks and leather jackets
yes.
and 90s kind of Clooney clones. um and with all these great, but what's cool about it is we saw some same characters and faces that we know, and then and and then there's some super super fresh faces, if all these great talents out there now that are huge A-listers, that they
Hmm.
look like they're 9 years old in this movie, but they're college kids, and it's super awesome to see people that you admire now or enjoy their work in things that you've never seen when they were young, because that's a little something I can relate to.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I actually, okay, so our last episode we talked about Valentine, and I kind of listed out some very funny early 2000s horror tropes that I noticed. And this movie didn't really have that many, although like you said, it's totally just bathed in the era that it is from. Um, and, last time, one of the tropes that I pointed out was the obligatory cast member from a hit teen TV show, because we had Angel in Valentine. In this case, we have Joey Lawrence, known for Brotherly Love and other sitcoms from the 90s. But we also have
Blossom.
the A-list actor years before they were A-list actors. We have Ava Mendez, which is just really cool to see. Like you said, she looks like 10 years old, like very young. This was like a decade before I think she even like really had a big, like her big break. So it's really cool to see that. I actually really love this movie. This was something that I didn't see until adulthood, just until like the past couple of years. I saw the original growing up and always liked it, but this one I kind of just flew under the radar for me. But I in some ways, this might be controversial, but in some ways, I enjoy this movie more than the first one. Like, I
What?
it I know, Matt, you're gonna have some words with me about that one. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the first one too, but this one, something about it, I think I just love I love the setting of like people making a movie. Like watching a movie about people making a movie is really fun to watch for me. And I think one of my favorite things is that this whole plot just feels like an R.L. Stine Fear Street novel that I would have read growing up, like a pulpy young adult like horror novel. And I kind of like the synopsis I gave at the beginning of the episode is kind of based on what I feel like the Fear Street version of this movie would be. But yeah, all in all, I'm a fan.
Yeah, I'm not like you said, I want to have words with you about you liking this more than the first. I'm not gonna have words with you. We've talked about this many a times how much I genuinely love the first one. It came out in that time of post Scream, um, your '90s sleep. I called it the MTV generational horror movies, and I'm always going to be the '80s kid because that's the era that I grew up in. But with that being said, I love the first Scream. I hated the Scream sequels, and I liked. I'm not gonna say love, but I liked I Know What You Did Last Summer and its sequel. But this one, for some reason, the first Urban Legends movie really hit me because like I said, they really tried to drive home like Robert Englund and Brad Dourif, the voice of Chucky and Daniel. So they really tried to really plug those horror icons being in this movie. It was really like amped it up, and it was like actually a good, serviceable, fun movie. And then when this one came out, I was like, it's going to be another shitty sequel like Scream 2. But when it first came out, loved this fucking movie. And I was a little bit leery when I was making our movie list. Because again, I want to do, usually I do like my 70s and 80s stuff, but for Katie, I had to do my late 90s, early 2000s stuff. And I was like, does this fit in for Video Express? Because we usually talk about movies that's of the VHS era. But I will say that when this movie came out, I bought it on VHS, so it does count. Um,
Yes.
and when I first saw it, I will have to say we'll get into this a little bit later, but it does have actually one of my favorite deaths in a slasher movie.
Ooh.
Is it The Window?
It is the window.
Which is your favorite? Okay.
Ooh,
That
that's a
is,
good
yeah,
one.
the window
Yeah.
death is so
Yeah.
I like. How many times in a horror movie do you see a killer chase somebody down and they try to make it out the window and they either get away or what have you? But like that to me just freaked me the fuck out when she clings onto the window and it fucking breaks. It just felt a little bit more realistic to me.
Yeah, I honestly, I think you're right. I think it was very organic in the fact that it looked like she broke the window just out of flailing, but obviously that was a
Hmm.
planned thing and it wasn't
Right.
forced. It looked actually
Mhm.
organic, and then the killer just uses the situation at hand, to his own ends, and it looked like smooth. It looked like it was a spur of the moment thing instead of this totally planned or totally tropey type of thing. Because basically, she gets guillotined, which is
Yeah.
we've seen window deaths and glass deaths and car door deaths and things like that, but that was interesting because uh, it could have gone so many different ways. And Katie, you mentioned that it avoids a lot of the horror tropes and all this other stuff. I actually think it's jam packed with them, especially at the beginning, which may be sort of a
Yes. Yeah.
misdirect because there's a lot of things that cram in. There's a lot of Hitchcock
Oh
stuff. There's a
yeah.
lot of '80s slasher type stuff. And there's a lot of '90s kind of franchise repeatable type stuff,
Hmm.
and that's all crammed in the first act. And then when it gets to she wakes up missing her kidney, and then we just it's the first time we've seen that maybe, and almost gets away, but then we have the dog, and then we have the window, and she's stuck, and he grabs her, and it's a fight for your life, and then the window breaks, and that's how you go out. uh yeah, there's some good stuff in there actually in that first kill. It almost sets too high of a bar for the rest of them, because the
Yeah.
rest of them were a
Yeah.
little
It really does.
average if you compare it
Yeah.
to that one. But the here here's the other secret. Like, Katie, you already said that this was the first time I viewed it, and that is true. I admit it. But right now, like, I've, for most of the COVID times, I've been, spending a lot of time with my mom, and I've been curating like a Dorothy Film Festival list to watch movies, with my mom, because there's only so much TV you can watch, even though I'm a TV junkie. But she loves to watch movies, and there's a ton she hasn't seen that weren't on TNT with commercials. So, or edited, or the dialogue's out or whatever. And so it was funny. So we're in this list, and sometimes Wednesdays is a movie night. She's like, "Well, we don't have what's the movie tonight?" And I was like, "I've got to watch this movie for this podcast for tomorrow so we can discuss it." And she's like, "Which movie?" So we added Urban
Oh,
Legends Final Cut
yes.
to the Dorothy Film Festival list. So I watched it with my mom. So,
Awesome.
and this is usually not her fare. Usually not her fare, but she always asks questions. She always critiques it. It's always being a mom. And her first thing was, in the room, she said, "Well, if she was missing a kidney, she would not have the energy or the strength to be
Yes.
running around like that." So I was like, "Mom, you've got to give the movie a little bit of leeway. Like, just like let it happen, because she ain't making it out of this room.
No.
So just go. It's fine." Um, and so it continues like that. If anybody has parents over, let's say 65, and most of us do, what watching movies is like.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And before we get to the spoilers of anybody else, she went down the list and picked who the actual killer was very early,
Oh,
which
that's
is
wonderful.
fun and admirable. But she did it in a very analytic way,
Oh,
because
I
she goes,
love that.
"Well, the only characters we've seen that are tall enough and strong enough to be in that coat and that," and she calls him the microphone guy, not the guy in the fencing mask. She calls him the microphone. And I'm like, damn it, this is the best thing. Now I got to mention this and steal it on this podcast to sound like I came up with the microphone face killer.
Oh, I love that
Because it
so
it
much.
was very like movie tech gear. I was like, God damn it, he looks like a microphone. And
He
and
does.
all I saw was the guy wearing a fencing mask, which was cool anyway.
Yeah, that's
But I'm like,
amazing.
nope, he's microphone man.
I'm cool
God
with
damn it.
dubbing him Microphone Man from here on out. I think that's
Ooh, I see
perfect.
what you did there, Katie. Did you see what you just did there?
Wait.
You said, "I'm fine dubbing him the microphone
Aha,
man."
yes, see, that was a pun that I did on
We're
purpose.
all we're all movie dorks. We're all movie dorks. It's fine. But
Um,
yeah, anyway, so that's the startup. So
It's funny. I actually wrote down that I actually hated his fucking look. I'm and Katie, you know this, that I'm a sucker for like very catchy looking killers in movies and stuff. Like if the movie is like lackluster and the kills are meh okay, at least make sure the killer looks cool. Um, I'm not saying that like the whole parka with the furry hooded killer in the first one was great, but the 1990 late 90s uh slick leather pleather looking trench coat with the fencing mask was just so fucking weird to me. I don't know what it was,
I
but I
love
was like,
it.
it was very yeah, I loved the mask, because I love when you can't see someone's face, and so
Mhm.
it's just your mind creates the image of a bad thing, which is always smart, because what you can't see is more scarier than what you can see.
right.
And did I just say more scarier? More scary. And so that was cool. But yes, Matt, I will agree. I hate to poo poo. I hate to poo poo stuff, because it's not easy to make movies or do things or even act in movies.
Right.
So I try not to be negative. Something, but yeah, I thought the jacket and it was kind of slicker. I was like, boy, they watched too many Jennifer Love Hewitt '90s movies and said, let's make that guy, because he got really famous. But we'll make like our thing the face mask. Maybe it was a '90s thing, 3/4 length jackets, and it's leather, or it's raining, and
Yeah.
maybe they don't have the money to go to Wilson's leather shop and buy an actual leather jacket, so it's plastic. But yeah, I thought it was a little weak, but that was the fashion. We've got to understand that we're watching it from that era. We can't put our own current, because right now we'd be like, oh, he needs to be in like Lululemons and a hoodie.
Oh,
And then,
the
it's like
Lululemon
it's
killer.
yeah, and I think that would it would certainly make his ass look fantastic, but,
Of course.
because Lululemon is the best fitting clothes ever. I love trying those clothes on and like, "Can I just get sponsored by Lululemon and wear nothing else?" It just makes you look good whatever you're doing,
Yeah.
including my butt. But yeah, I did like that, but I loved the face mask, but then I don't know, that was, the microphone man, so it was good.
I love that. I think I should have listed the like leather, like the trench coat, as like one of my early 2000s tropes, cuz I that totally just sailed over my head, cuz yeah, I mean, like you said, this is definitely filled with a lot of just like horror movie tropes in general. They're just like they didn't have like the girl in the white tank top and jeans, which is what I'm always like seeing in these early 2000s horror movies. I was like waiting for it, like any minute now somebody's going to do it. Um but yeah, I like the fencing mask. I feel like growing up I weirdly like meshed these two movies together into my brain, and I always thought that the killer in the first movie had the fencing mask, but it's actually just like the big parka hood. But I like the look of it. It doesn't really make any sense. Like even when they reveal who the killer is, it's like, so why the fencing mask then? But I'm not going to question it too much because I thought it looked cool.
And I think they attempted because like we never got like like we never even walked through an athletic center like where the college
Oh,
team was fencing or
Right.
something. Like we never got any of that. But we did see it hanging somewhere, which I think was just in the costume rack of this very, very well endowed film school.
Yeah. They
You
had
know,
resources.
I mean, like we open up with the cold open on the airplane thing, and it's like, and then it cuts, and you're like, oh, it's a little misdirect. It's a student movie, and you're like, have you ever seen a fucking student movie being made? This is
right.
not a student movie.
Yeah, I'm like,
You know,
where did
this
they
isn't
get
even a
all
low
these
budget movie.
resources?
Yeah, that's right. But they did cover that in that speech where like the dean is going, it the best and biggest film school in the world. They're
Right.
like, so we're like, okay, we get it.
Of course, the nameless best film school in the
That's
world. We don't know what it is,
right.
but
Which was in Ontario, Canada, and the bell tower was actually made for the movie because
yes.
that campus didn't have a bell tower, and it's paper mache, which I dig.
Yes, I love that. And they spent like
Somebody did their research.
$150,000 on just that.
Yeah. Oh, I like to read up. You know, Matt, yeah, I'll read up a little bit, mostly for people, and that's where I caught most of my stuff of where there's some cool connections with
Yeah.
this one.
That's
Um,
awesome. I super appreciate that because normally what we do on the show is when I'll watch the movie at home and I'll sit on my couch with a fucking beer in my hand and watch it and just jot down shit that I already know mentally and just jot it down. And when Katie watches it, she's
Right.
like research after research after research, and then we just come together. But I'm really glad that our first guest, took the initiative here.
yes.
I, I really just read, when you have like IMDb Pro, you can go in and get some cool background and
Yeah.
trivia, and get a lot of the information on the other people, and that's really my first resource for stuff. And then you can go to like the interwebs and Wikipedia or Google or whatever. But I start there,
Yeah.
and because it shows you some
Yep.
connections and some things where you can kind of rabbit hole inside of the industry, which is neat. And yeah, I don't know what's the next topic about this one because there's so much to talk about. Where do you want to go from here? Because we could go, like I said, we're about to go off on a tangent, and we should keep it with the movie right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know what? Let's just get right down to. I like jumping into the cast next. Let's start with our leading lady, Jennifer Morrison, who played Amy Mayfield. She played in, of course, Once Upon a Time, House, Stir of Echoes. But she's our leading lady in this movie. What's your guys' thoughts on our lead actress here, Amy Mayfield?
Uh, I loved it because when I saw that Jennifer Morrison and all these other names that are yet to be established, except for one or two, who I know, I'm like, oh gosh. But and then I was literally taken aback at how totally Jennifer Morrison it is, but how not as polished or kind of regal as she totally is now, or even when she was on House, because I'm a House fiend, love that show. All the seasons, that show never really jumped the shark, really. I thought it was still good, even though that, that first team with Jennifer, they actually left, but they stuck around. I thought this way to keep it fresh with characters. I thought she was fabulous on that show, with some sort of a conflicted, kind of character. Again, we're not going on a house tangent. That's a whole other podcast. But see, I thought it was great because she wasn't over the top. She was almost, the everyday. They even Joey Lawrence has the line, the girl next door thing. Don't play that BS, type of thing when she's actually more connected than she, apparently led on because of who her dad
Mhm.
was. And, she just, I think she held it. I thought it was great. I thought she was great in it. What a great kind of first type of thing, to put you on the map along with the rest of the cast that we'll talk about.
Yeah, I love her as a character. I love her as a final girl too. Like I feel like she just seems like a normal person, kind of like what you said, Andre. Like she's not over the top. Like she's kind of keeps her wits about her throughout the whole movie. She's pretty calm and collected. And she's not that kind of stereotypical final girl of like the shy, chaste virgin who's like super unsure of themselves. Like she seems pretty sure of herself from the get-go, but they still give her these moments of vulnerability, like where she still feels like a real person, like when she's going to ask Trevor in the screening room if he'd read her script for the first time, and you can tell that she kind of thinks he's cute, and she kind of fumbles over her words and says something silly, and that's just like a really a human moment. And so I really enjoyed watching her, and I thought she carried this plot pretty well. Like I thought she was really fun to watch.
I agree, and it takes someone like, usually your leading character is not, like I said, over the top or so understated that it takes you out of it. Your leading character, especially in something like this, has got to be solid and a through line, throughout. You've got to be able to follow, even though they may not do anything special or super heroic, or, obviously because they're the final part, they don't ever get killed, but they're in peril.
Hmm.
And it's how they handle that. And they can't bounce all over the place, which I think, if you would go super deep here, guys, like, is what they were sort of showing with the friend that's a terrible quote unquote actor, that they all have to use her in her movies, but she's terrible,
Yeah.
and she's the
Mhm.
first one that gets killed, and she's trying to fly the plane, or then of course she's off to ER on a guest spot because Lawrence's dad put it up, which is another, I mean, it endears me to this movie because ER is tied for my all-time favorite television show. And so I'm like, oh my god, they're doing an ER thing here, this is fantastic. And you know she would be way too over the top.
Mhm.
And Jennifer Morrison, she just kind of keeps it on this even keel, and allows you to come with it the whole time, even though some of the scenes in the run, like, well, why didn't she say anything here, or why didn't she
Yeah.
did take it to Loretta Devine and they're not believing. It's like, you gotta, and that's other questions that Dorothy has while we're watching. She's like, well, she didn't do anything about that, that's unreal. I'm like, mom, just let the movie, just okay, just give it a little bit of air. But yeah, I think it's important on your leading character to be solid.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a really, really, really big fan of hers in this movie. She's of course got that perfect girl next door vibe. She's cute as a button, and she real. I mean, I'm not going to say she's. This is nothing against her as an actress. I don't think her character is as strong as, say, like Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween, but her acting really elevates what's not there in the writing. And I think it's honestly a shame that she didn't get to do more of this type of horror movie, even though God knows she's went on to do much bigger and better things. But I think she did a fucking great job, and she's an easy final girl to relate to, and easy on the eyes.
Hmm.
I think I think it's just a different character. I think a Laurie Strode or a Sydney, those are different, kind of like, they'd have to step up and really become badasses to survive. This is more of a reluctant. Katie, you said, vulnerable as a person or as a character, and I think some of her stuff, like her reluctance to actually be more assertive, is what makes her vulnerable, right? It's
Hmm.
almost a reluctance there, but then she's thrown into this, and really the switch is when the twin brother, which is also could be a misdirect, is she comes in and it's totally believable. So she seems a little naive, but then she's also smart enough to go, okay, let's just go with this.
Yeah, like, she's just, like, solving a mystery this whole time, like, which is another
Yeah.
reason I'm gonna keep bringing up, like, Fear Street and young adult horror novels because this plot just it's the fact that she's, like, teaming up with the twin brother of someone who died that she had a crush on, and now they're solving a mystery together, like, that's just really fun to watch.
Yeah, and I like your your teen kind of suspense whodunits
Mhm.
adventures because I'm tying now that's tying into a sort of how kind of choppy, I don't say choppy the movie was, but sometimes thing end and then you're just in this next thing, and then now you're dealing with the twin brother and you're gonna try to catch the guy. It almost goes back to my era of choose your own adventure novels, which were our kind of adventure ones, right? And it's like, okay, Amy Mayfield, her DP dies. If you want her to go back and try to catch the killer, go to page 58. If you want her to continue on and not go to page 54. And it has a little of that vibe too. So I totally understand. And I'm not saying that's where the inspiration came from, but it's a fun way to go through an adventure.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's funny that you that again, Katie, the age difference that you are saying like Fear Street and the teen novels. When I'm watching the movie and I wrote down, the twin brother thing, I'm like, this is fucking General Hospital because it's straight out of like
Yeah.
a soap opera type thing. So yeah, but since we're talking about the
it
twins,
it
let,
was.
let's let's dive into Matthew Davis, who played, of course, both Trevor and Travis Stark. We know him most from Blue Crush, Legally Blonde, but of course, because of my girlfriend, I know him from The Vampire Diaries. What was your guys' feelings on Matthew Davis?
I just wanted to say I also know him from The Vampire Diaries and the spin-off show Legacies, which is a role he is
Yeah.
still playing to this day. I love Matthew Davis. I love him in Legally Blonde. I love him in Blue Crush. I like him in this movie too. I feel like the twin dynamic is really funny to me. As soon as he just shows up and he's just like, yeah, I'm his twin brother. I'm just like, that's amazing. That's incredible. I just love that so much. And like even my boyfriend was like, "Is this a soap opera?" Like, so that's funny that you mentioned that earlier, Matt. I thought, you know, I'm not totally convinced that his character isn't just isn't a twin and is actually just the ghost of the guy because he never actually like interacts with any other characters until the very end. um, but he kind of just like fades into the background and just like shows up between scenes to like discuss updates to the mystery with our main character here. And yeah, I don't know, I feel like he probably could have had more business to do, but I don't have any like major complaints about his role. I thought he's fun to watch, he's super cute, so like I definitely have no complaints there. And yeah, I think this was like his second movie he'd ever done. So it's really great first entry.
Yeah, I guess it's my turn.
Yeah.
Not that that's a bad thing. So we'll talk about the guy and then we'll talk about the character. I think. Well, let's talk about the character first. I'll jump in at the end almost of character kind of uh, interrogation here when you were talking about the twin brother thing, and I thought, if you've never seen it, if you're trying to rewrite a movie or go in a different direction, and of course they were doing this on purpose, like, is he the actual killer and jealous of his brother? That's one way. Is
Mhm.
he actually Travis and faked his own death? Because we did have that leading line, like, I mean, blew his head off, and we don't, his head clean off, so it's not, dental records won't even help. So I'm like, there's a
Right.
misdirect.
Mhm.
And you could have very easily written a draft of this movie where Travis becomes the killer because we've been led to that way because he got
Yeah.
a C minus and you don't know why, and he's now trying to kill these people but also capturing it on camera so he can make the ultimate student film of act right, that's almost a snuff film, and then win the prize. I bet you there was maybe a meet, like when Derrickson were writing this movie, that they could have come up with, like, hey, is he okay, who's our killer?
Yeah.
um but then it ends up being the guy from Die Hard, Hans Booby. um so it's Okay, so that's the character, and it's fine. But I think they did that on purpose, Katie. Like you were saying, like he's not really there a lot. He comes in. It's all for that kind of, ooh, is he the guy? It's kind of the misdirect, or he's almost a MacGuffin of a character. He's not even a
Yeah.
MacGuffin. He's a MacGuffin of a character.
Yeah.
So you really don't look at really don't look at everything else. The one thing right off the bat that it's not the Joey Lawrence character.
Yeah.
From scene one, you're like, it's not him. Yeah, everybody wants him to be the schmarmy guy, but it's not him. So just move on to the rest of the cast. But Matthew Davis is the guy. Yeah, great. It. Damn it. I mean, he's like when you insert. It's like inserting Tom Brady into your team. It's like Matthew Davis is like the Tom Brady of the leading or supporting guy. He's like 6'2", good looking, solid. He's got that little, nice little grin. He can be mysterious, or he can be schmarmy or charming or goofy. And you're like, okay, whatever. Damn it, tall, good looking guy. And, us short, good looking guys hate the tall, good looking guy. Right. No, but it's, I'm kidding, a little bit. And, but he's that guy, and you're like, damn it, like that's a leading guy.
Yeah.
That is, but he's not. He's the perfect insert.
Yeah.
Like he's literally a Ken. He's a perfect Ken doll to insert into your diorama, and it just works, and you believe it, and that's what makes a great career, because if you can be that type of actor or that type of face and carry that through, then you can have a career. And looking at it from the professional standpoint of it, that's certainly awesome. And you're never going to go wrong with inserting Matthew Davis if in the script description says, this guy, he's the jock next door, or the nice brooding filmmaker, sensitive but masculine. And nowadays, now that he's so established in new scripts, it probably says, meet Kurt, a guy next door, parentheses, think Matthew Davis, unparentheses, and it's like, he's got to that point now.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. So like I said, he's the Tom Brady he's very Tom Brady, and he played a quarterback. So it's even worse.
Yep.
And Blue Crush is a great
I
movie.
love Blue Crush.
I
Yes.
love Blue Crush.
Yeah, I've got nothing else
next
to
character.
add. Yeah, I was gonna say I've got nothing else to add to Matthew
We
Davis.
summed it up there.
You summed that the fuck up. I was gonna go ahead to Hart Bachner because like you said, Han Booby. But let's save him for last. Let's save him for last.
Yeah.
Let's
Okay.
jump right in to Mr. Joey Whoa Lawrence as Graham. What did you guys think of Mr. Joey Lawrence?
He's he's such a dick in this movie, and it's awesome. Like, it's just great to see. He's so fun, and he's just so condescending, and I love that in this world before everybody had cell phones, there's always a character that's like douchey guy who's always on their cell phone, and this was that guy. And yeah, I thought he's really fun. I mean, they he's a little bit of a red herring, but like you said, Andre, like, from the get-go, like, okay, it's not this guy. Like, it's definitely not this guy. He's just kind of a slightly antagonistic guy for like 5 seconds in the movie. But I really like that he ends up being the main girl's agent by the end of it. Like, when she has her own career, it's like, now you've got that guy on your side now.
No doubt. And that's exactly who you want on your
Yes.
side in this bullshit of a business, because he's automatically a cog in the wheel of what I call the machine, right?
Yeah.
And even though, and the whole movie is really about, it's a side eye dig to the machine, because it's not about student filmmakers learning how to make cinema. The whole thing is geared towards, if you don't win this award, you're not going to have a career.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's about, and then they even talk about connections or pedigrees and all that stuff, which is not unnecessarily true. And I was thinking of kind of legacies in the industry and things like that, and you don't think of actually how important those are, whether the connections are noticeable or not noticeable, or known or unknown. Even Ed Begley Jr.'s dad was a famous actor, so it's like, that's how Ed Begley Jr. come on. But yeah, look, the Lawrence character, it's tough. I think he plays that role perfect, right? Like you were saying,
Yeah.
Katie. The problem with me is he's playing that role like because I've known Joey even before his brothers were born, and then that entire family is probably kind of the nicest family that you can know. Like they're super sweet and thoughtful, and you're like, this guy's not a douche.
Yeah.
And they're like, he may act like a douche on his shows, but like they're actually genuinely nice guys. And if you see them, they're like, oh my gosh, how's it going? How's your sister? How's your mom? You're like, okay. So when you see someone you know that's kind of antithetical to like a role, you have to be like, he's doing a pretty good job. He's acting a pretty good job. And here's the first of the tie-in, Matt, of many things. Of course, Joey's there. I've known him basically my entire life. There's some fabulous photos of me and Joey with very similar haircuts back when we are in the single digits. And but ironically, weird term, my best friend from high school is now his manager. So
Oh,
it's
whoa.
Wow.
it's a weird world. But so anytime I see Joey, it's just always fun. There's our first yeah there's our first uh you know first degree of Kevin Bacon thing. But
All right.
and we were just talking about him the other day. But he's good at whatever he does, and he's always energetic and kind of super energetic, and he fits that schmarmy role perfect. Like great casting. And you're right, you have to have that one kind of leading teenage guy, of those movies. And you got Matthew Davis as the Tom Brady, and you got Joey Lawrence as your, oh my god, it's Joey Lawrence.
That's so awesome to that's also awesome that you know him so well. It's really great to hear. Like I love anytime an actor can just play a total asshole and it be and like really sell it, and then you find out that they're actually like the nicest, like kindest person ever. Like I love that. Like that really is just like a testament to his acting
Yeah.
ability in that movie.
Well, I'm sure Joe can be an asshole sometimes, or is an asshole. I was like, I don't hang out with him every day in the last 10 or 15 years, so who knows? Maybe like this movie changed him. I don't know.
When I first watched the movie when I was younger, I didn't necessarily like his character that much because in my head I was like, oh, he's overplaying the part. Like they don't, he's amping it up, he's hamming it up or whatever. But then you flash forward to now, and I don't think I'm going to piss off any producers or financiers that I've ever worked with because they're not listening to this fucking show. But I now realize, holy shit, he's playing this fucking part perfectly because I don't know. And Katie, you're shaking your head because you've been on set with me and you know these motherfuckers. Like
Yeah.
he is playing that role, chef's kiss, uh, perfectly to those types. So it took me a couple years to realize how well Joey Lawrence did, but God love him, he played the perfect little producer agent type asshole.
And I think the reason he pulls it off almost perfectly, which you think that the actor is clowning that type of character, like over the
Right.
top,
Mhm.
but it's spot on if you've ever been in the industry and know the people on that side of the table. And Joey does. So I mean, he grew up, we all grew up in this industry and knows we could sit there and watch a movie like that and name like 11 people in
Yeah.
real life that are that guy. And
Right.
so I think it was just something natural for Joey to be able to do.
Let's talk about who I think is probably arguably currently the most well-known person in this cast, Anson Mount, who played Toby, the rival of our lead character. Of course, Anson Mount from Hell on Wheels, the ill-fated Marvel Inhumans, Star Trek Discovery. What did you guys think of Anson Mount as his character of Toby?
Yeah, so Toby, his as a character, kind of annoyed me. Like he is just such a douchebag.
Yes.
I hate I hate the directors being an asshole to their crew on set and throwing a big temper tantrum. And I'm like, it's really funny though. Like it's really funny. Like especially after that first opening where like you don't really fully know yet that they're students and they're on the plane, and then somebody says the line of like, "Gosh, he thinks he's like a real director or something," and it's like you don't. So at this point, you're like, "Oh, cool." So he's not even like they're just students, and he's already acting like this. I can't imagine how he's gonna be when he goes out into the real world. So I thought that was pretty funny, and I mean, I'm sure that's unfortunately more accurate than we want it to be. But I thought he was a good red herring. I don't think I ever really actually suspected him, but as far as just like there's enough red herrings thrown into the mix that there's like all sorts of attempts at misdirection. And they set up pretty early that he's got this kind of almost rivalry with the main girl because he's like, I'm doing a horror movie and you took my genre, which was extra funny line to me. Like you stole my genre. um, but yeah, I recognize him, but I actually don't know if I know a ton of stuff that he's been in before actually. But I know I've seen him.
Yeah, I think it's as the character, it's perfectly serviceable of who that guy is supposed to be. Again, I don't know if Derrickson and the other, that they're actually poking at the industry because this is like Derrickson's first thing that he wrote
Yeah,
made. I have to fact check that,
it
right?
is. Yeah.
Um, and I've met Scott. I know Scott. I know his producing partner and writing, Robert Cargill very well. So it's interesting to see all this new, young stuff, and to have it, like if you are an actor, you've been on these sets and you watch directors because they're in charge, but then actually the producer's really in charge. And so it's all this kind of battle for power, sort of in this realm. And
And
I've worked with so many awesome directors and people that sort of have that thing, but I think that was a little poke at the machine again, or at the industry in itself, that there are people out there like that. And I'll tell you, when the first time you ever are on the other side, and the first time that you actually call action or call cut or call, like, it's a whole other world, and you get this little rise and you're like, oh my god, this is so cool. And I think a lot of people that want to be that director, they either want to just develop and create cool stuff that people enjoy, or they want to be that guy that yells cut,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like cut, and then he does it
yeah,
so well. Well, he's like, because a lot of people don't like, he starts yelling effects up, and like if someone wasn't industry, they're like, the
Like,
fuck's
what
he
does that
talking
mean?
about? And if you've been on it, you're like, you know exactly what that means. And what's great is the two, like, crew guys roll their eyes and start bouncing, and they're like, whatever, this
yeah.
douchebag. It's like, we're gonna be working with another guy that does the exact, it's almost interchangeable, sometimes. And I think that was a little commentary again, which I thought was funny because I love making commentary about the machine.
Yeah.
I've got a fun little semi third degree here, um, with another cast member of the Monster Squad. So I of course I saw this movie when it first came out in 2000. So I've seen this movie multiple times. And Anson Mount's character of Toby, in the opening scene during the student film, killer airplane scene, whatever, when he does the fucking action, that always stuck with me, and I thought that was
I love that.
goddamn ridiculous and hilarious. I would sometimes, and Katie, you probably even were on set with me when sometimes I would jokingly yell "fucking action." So
Yep.
a couple years ago, I was doing a parody sequel of one of my own films, and of course, I've got Phoebe herself, Ashley Bank, to graciously do a cameo for me. And in that movie, I'm actually playing a parody of myself, and in that movie, I do the whole fucking action. So it kind of all comes full circle here.
Yes.
But yeah, it's so fun because Andre, you're absolutely right with the machine, because I've worked with so many indie people. I haven't worked with like anybody really like big in the industry, but just in the indie crowd. But the indie crowd is just as much as a victim to wanting to be that guy, that one who yells the action and cut and look big when they actually don't know what the fuck they're doing. And you're right; it's absolutely
That's
a
right.
play. It's a play on all of that. And Katie will be the first to say, like on my set, like I never treat the movie as like my fucking movie. Like I treat it as our movie. Anybody that's on the set or that's putting that movie together, it's a collective. It's a collective thing. And let's face it, a good 95% of your directors, they don't see it that way. And I think Anson really played that pitch perfectly with his character.
No doubt.
All right, let's hop on over to the character of Vanessa, played by the smoking hot Eva Mendes. What'd you guys think of her character in this movie?
I mean, as with a lot of characters in this movie, and I think I say this at least once an episode, I would have just liked a little more. Just want a little more. I
Yeah,
thought she was really
yeah,
cool. I liked all the scenes that she was in. She's just so like badass and cool and funny. I felt like I know her. I felt like I've met her in some way. Like that character just seemed very familiar to me in a lot of ways. But you know, I did read that the director had mentioned that a lot of character development scenes got cut out to increase to kind of up the pacing of the movie. And I totally understand why you'd want to do that, because sometimes pacing is frankly more important because you got to keep people like interested. But I it makes me wonder, like, what more could we have gotten? Like, could we have got, because I love all these characters. I think they're all pretty funny and like they have really great rapport with each other. But I would have liked to see a little bit more. So, I thought Eva Mendes was great in this movie, but she's not in it that much. So I would have liked to see her a little bit more, I think.
I think I agree with you one, and I think I was reading in my modicum of research before I and I was trying not to give the movie away to myself before I watched it and enjoyed the organicness of it. But I think that character was, from what I read, a couple things that said that character was even smaller than it was before,
Mhm.
and Ottman liked Eva Mendes, on camera and on the set, and so they added, as they shot, they added more stuff for this character to do, which is always a great thing, because who knows, there's nothing more sliding doors or synchronicity or serendipity than the movie industry. And if Eva Mendes may not have gotten more stuff to do in this movie, it may not have gotten, no, she may not have become Eva Mendes, and then we'd all be lesser for it. But Ryan Gosling aside, but the yeah, I think that's a cool thing. I think you could have used more of her, but then she might have taken a little
yeah,
of the kind of gravity away from Mayfield just a bit. So I think it's a pretty good. I see where we'd want more of that character, but
Yeah.
I think you're right, for pacing or the sake of the movie. We have enough of kind of the rockin' badass kind of hard. Is her character tropey for this time? Or if it's not, because she's kind of the badass, there's very little supportive undergarments. She's in your tank top with no
yes,
undergarments. If you
yes,
notice, there you go, Kate.
It's
Like, we
true.
have it a little bit of
I
what you
do a
mentioned,
little bit.
but she's also not into the dudes, and everybody always makes the point of hitting on her. And then she makes a point of, showing the girlfriend in the badass, car that comes up, and you're like, we've seen that a couple of times. Because it's supposed to be a misdirect, and it's supposed to be this kind of guy versus girl type of sexual vibe, especially in college. And I think it was played just enough. It wasn't too much of that. It wasn't over the top, and it wasn't just brushed by for being scared. I think they dealt with it. They did it. Said, "Yeah, what's up? Who cares? This is our movie."
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, obviously, you don't. There's very few people that are as striking on camera as Eva Mendes is. But she's so young. You're like, wait, that is Eva Mendes,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh my god, this is amazing. There's a lot of really good looking people in this movie. It's this is when they went like, yeah, everybody's good looking.
Yeah, this has a really hot
yeah,
cast. I remember like saying that out loud when I was watching this yesterday, because I did a double
Yeah.
feature of the first movie followed by this one, and I was like, is this cast hotter than the first one? They might be. Like
It may be, although, and that's another thing. I mean, Rebecca Gayheart is so striking
that's
on
true.
camera
yeah,
that she almost pulls you out of anything that she's doing, because it's this like dream sequence,
Yeah.
anytime a photo is being taken of her, because it's ridiculous.
yeah,
But yeah, it is a hot cast, and I think it's a great entree. But then we get to, obviously, we have the Scooby and the Shaggy and the 3PO and the R2. We've got we've got Anthony Anderson as the kind of, goofy bumbling FX guy, so it balances it off.
Yes. I That's actually a pretty good segue into talking about those special effects guys. I think we should talk about them as a duo because they come as a package deal. So we have
Absolutely.
Anthony Anderson as Stan and Michael Bacall as Dirk, and they are so delightful in this movie. I love watching them. I I think one of my favorite parts of this whole movie involves them, and to me, it just sums up like, I mean, I haven't had a ton of on-set experience. I have a little bit, but this to me just sums up like everything I've personally experienced, which is we need 3 hours. You only have one. Perfect. And
Yes.
they just
Love
are
it.
like,
Yeah.
all right, all you get is one. Let's go. And so yeah, I love them. I love the idea that they're like horror fans and they just like want to do blood and make fake guts out of like cornflakes and latex and stuff. I thought they were a really great addition to this movie. And then, Anthony Anderson, we also see him like in some of the scary movie franchise, and then we see him in Scream 4. And then, we get Michael Bacall in Death Proof and in Inglorious Bastards. So it's like really cool to see that they, went on to do a lot of cooler stuff.
So I felt it in my soul when those two guys said we can make that with cornflakes and latex, because that's my original
Yes.
background was of course effects and stuff, and those two guys are my favorite parts of the entire movie, because like you said, Katie, you have, give me 3 hours, you only have one. Fucking spot on with how everything goes, especially in the indie world. Um, but yeah, the cornflakes. I don't know how many times that I've created fake guts and stuff out of like pantyhose and cornflakes and cotton balls and latex and shit. So I love those guys. I especially love, like you said, Anthony Anderson, who is a comedic genius. He's been in so much stuff and so many different things. But the really one I want to jump on real quick, because Andre and I were talking before the show about our little third degrees and stuff like that. While I was watching this movie, and again, as our listeners probably know, I don't do any research. I just watch the movie, drink the beer, and just jot down shit that I know. And Katie does all the research. So while I was watching this movie, I was like, you know what? This is our first guest. Andre's our first guest, and unlike most shows, we would, usually have Andre on. We talk about Monster Squad, and we're doing fucking Urban Legends Final Cut. So while I'm watching this movie, I'm like, how can I maybe slightly somehow tie this movie to Andre? And of course, I didn't know the whole Joey Lawrence kinship or anything, but I realized when I was watching that, when it came to the effects guys, Michael Bacall was on an episode of Mr. Belvedere, and he was also on Highway to Heaven. And I was like, wait a minute. So was Andre. So that was the only way that I could.
That's
That was
awesome.
the only way I could figure out how to tie you to this movie.
That's the only way. Ooh, I'm gonna blow
That's
your
all I could
mind
think
then.
of.
I don't
We'll
know,
go for it.
maybe not. No, and I think like these characters, yes, I think these characters are essential. They're celebrated. Everybody knows those types or those people, and hopefully they go on and have fulfilling careers in their field, which is usually not celebrated, except for
Right.
inside of the bubble, right?
Mhm.
And maybe you get a chainsaw award or a Saturn award or something for best new creature build or something. And I know some, obviously with Monster Squad, I know the icons of the industry now that were about 2 years removed. Like when we were doing Monster Squad, all the Stan Winston's guys that built our monsters in Monster Squad are now the icons and titans of the industry. Like, and
Right.
they were this they, and I think Monster Squad's important, and this era is important because it was a game changer, it was a paradigm shift in effects, because we were going into the digital age, but you still needed creature builds. And actually, during Monster Squad and Aliens and Terminator and Predator, all these guys were the same team. It invented new ways to do stuff based off the old ways, and they launched the industry into a whole new paradigm. But our guys on Monster Squad, if you have ever seen Wolfman's Got Nards, we talk a little about it, and you see their enthusiasm of learning of how to figure this out for Monster Squad, which was awesome because you see that same youthful enthusiasm in like these two
Indeed.
guys. And I hope Stan and Dirk, right? Stan and Dirk go and have kind of at least fulfilling careers in their own right. That's what you're rooting for,
Yeah,
except
Right.
for they get killed.
they get killed. Yeah.
The thing that upsets me the most is we talked earlier about how the window decapitation really set the bar for the death scenes, and it really makes you hope that Stan and Dirk really get it hard. I mean, these are the effects guys. You would think that their demise would be really like hardcore and over the top, but it was very lackluster in that department. I feel like.
Yeah, it wasn't great. I mean, what Dirk gets electrocuted, and there's a great burn face kind of final shot of him. Stan gets electrocuted, which I thought was interesting because he could have hit him in the head. He hits him in the head with the kind of hammer
Yeah.
axe thing, but it doesn't kill him, which I thought was interesting. And then he's like, "Ooh, I've got a more creative idea. I'm gonna split this cable in half and then electrocute this guy." Um, but you would think when he just kind of gets electrocuted and he goes "Zzz," and then goes off camera.
Yeah.
You wanted like a skin falling off or eyeballs bursting out or something,
Yeah.
especially for the effects guys. And who knows, maybe they tried something and it didn't work. God knows they tried some stuff in Monster Squad that didn't make the final cut, uh, like a goldfish spilling out of Gilman's mouth when he takes his
Yeah.
last breath.
Yeah. I've seen that the deleted scene.
That's a I'm so glad that didn't make it. Um, and and because it would only like, where did he get it? Like, he went in someone's house and stole a goldfish? Like, they're just, I don't know. But yeah, you want their deaths to be a little bit more special effectsy, but I don't know. Maybe that was the red herring again.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it, and we'll get into the details when we get to this actual character, but considering like who the killer is and like what their motive is and what their kind of options were here, it makes sense that they had a pretty simple, straightforward way that they could have killed him just with the hammer, but chose to do this really elaborate, like inconvenient, like extra thing with the electrocution. And yeah, I mean, it's a little lackluster, but it's at least it has a really fun setting. I really like the idea of being in like an old like carnival ride.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think you make a great point, Katie, in the fact that he makes an extra two steps to kill this guy. And in the window sequence that we are talking about earlier, it's not like it's a quick decision, just,
Right.
weapon at hand and boom, fast and clean. And I'm thinking on my feet. But I mean, obviously he's a creative killer once we find out who it is, even though he makes shitty movies, but maybe he's a creative killer.
Yeah.
I feel like this next person on our list was probably the one person on the cast that they brought in because at this point in time she was maybe very recognizable with that MTV crowd, and that's Jacinda Barrett, who played Lisa, who got decapitated by the window. Of course, she was very famous in the late '90s for The Real World on MTV. So I feel like she's definitely a stunt cast person that was brought in for the people, my generation, who was around what, like 15 or so at the time, 17, and somebody that we recognize because, Jennifer Morrison, Matthew Davis, all these people, we didn't know these people, but she was that person that we were like, oh, she's popular on MTV. Let's shoehorn her in there. What did you guys think of her role?
Well, I want to add some context to her death scene here is from like a production standpoint because I felt like her existence in this movie and the whole kill with like the kidney in the bathtub and stuff, while it's really cool and I really like it, I felt like it felt really out of place with the rest of the movie. Like it just felt like I don't really know how this connects to anything else. And that's because that kill and that character was not in the original script. So after they finished shooting the movie, the studio decided that they needed to have a kill early on in the movie to like make it seem more dangerous because otherwise you don't get a kill until Jessica Caulfield gets killed with like on set with the camera. So
Mm.
this scene with the window and stuff was just kind of added in last minute. So I guess on its own, I really like it. I mean, she's not. as a character, she doesn't really do that much. She just kind of is just there to like be the introductory kill. But that being said, I do really like that whole sequence. It's actually one of the scarier parts of the movie for me, which is interesting that because it was added after the fact. But when the killer like sticks his hand in her wound, in her kidney wound, and like starts to peel the skin back, I felt my soul leave my body for a moment. Like that just really like gives me the willies.
Yeah, I think, and maybe because it was done after the fact as an add-on or a pickup type shot to like we said before, it really set the bar. And it was interesting that it was shot last, and then it becomes the first kill,
Yeah.
and then the other ones are kind of like, okay, or yeah, because like the next one, like okay, the DP gets hit with like he gets hit with a lens, and the first thing I said was like, oh, don't break that nice lens; those are expensive.
Right, I was
I was
thinking that
like,
too. I was like,
I don't
yeah.
care about I don't care about the guy's cranium. I'm worried about the lens. Like those are expensive, and I think it definitely set the tone. I think it's totally serviceable, and maybe Matt, you're right. That was a stunt cast. Doesn't matter how long she's in it, because she's a face and a name. It's like, oh, I know that person. I'll
Mhm.
stick around and continue watching this movie, even though she's gone. But Katie, you are exactly right. I think that sequence is probably the best sequence in the movie, and which is fine because if you can make a whole movie and someone talks about one sequence and goes, "Dude, that was awesome," then you have a win,
Yes,
right? Because not
absolutely.
every movie has a sequence that works or that people will talk about. And if you can have one, it's a win. If you have more than one, you've struck gold. Eh, But I think it set the bar, like we said, and I think it set a good tone. And I think some other people probably caught on after that with that sequence of how cramped and claustrophobic and cold and chase for your life. And then I mean, it's crammed with a lot of stuff. It's like he sees her, but then she's cognizant. She locks the doors and puts stuff in the way and makes barriers. And she's not the typical running through the forest and trips on the root and then she's dead,
Yeah.
which is so annoying in movies. So I think it was a good kind of battle scene. Like you wanted her to make it out, and then yeah, when he digs the fingers into her kid, like ow, that would hurt.
Ugh.
It's like that would really hurt. So it's that did get a oof from Dorothy as well.
So something that I realized later on in the movie, and I forgot to actually jot this down, but something that's very interesting to me is, of course, in the first Urban Legend movie, all the kills are each single kill is based on an urban legend, whereas in this movie, all the kills except for hers are basically just fucking kills. Her kill is the only actual death in the entire movie
Yeah.
that is based on an urban legend, with the whole kidney being taken out thing. And it never occurred to me that the movie's called Urban Legends Final Cut because they're making a movie within a movie about urban legends. And her, Lisa, the character's death is the only actual urban legend kill in the movie. And that's makes more sense now, Kay, that you say that this was this was a pickup shot, basically. And it's funny, they were like, oh, let's go the extra fucking route. Instead of just inserting in a cool death scene, they actually gave it a little bit of depth and some creativity.
Yeah.
Or who knows? Maybe they sat around watching a rough cut of the movie and goes, "Wait a minute, we don't have any urban
Urban
legends in
legends.
this movie called Urban Legends. Shit, we've got to add at least one."
Let's get one in real quick.
And don't think those meetings don't happen.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
maybe they were like, maybe it occurred to them that shit, we used all the good ones in the first movie. We've only got like one good one
Yeah,
left.
they're like,
Yeah, they like tried to do they started to do the kidney one at the end of the first one. It's like reference because she's like, that's how I'm gonna kill you, but she gets thwarted before she can actually succeed. So that's kind of a cool little, almost like a nod to the first one. Like we talked about this urban legend, now you actually get to see it played out.
Right.
there also may be even a deeper, more meta type thing here, that the whole movie within the movie is a tropey type urban legendy type thing. Yeah, they were making this horror movie and people actually got killed in the asylum.
Yeah.
Right.
And maybe the whole movie is the urban legend. The movie within the movie, maybe that's the urban legend, and then they just added one cool kill about the kidney. But That would be getting really deep on a '90s
That's
sequel.
that is way too deep for this movie. That's for sure. All right, so let's jump over to Jessica Caulfield. I want to talk about her since we talked about her on the previous episode when we talked about Valentine. Let's talk about the character of Sandra. I know she's only in it for like a little bit, but what did you guys think about her?
Jessica Caulfield is a treasure in everything that I see her in. She is so funny. I think this is a funny connection to our last episode, which was Valentine, which came out a year after this movie. So in both of those movies, she is the second character to die. And in both of those movies, her character is set to go to Los Angeles the day after she's killed. So nobody questions why she's gone. And I really love that that happened 2 times in a row for her. Yeah, I think she actually. I feel like other than, of course, what we were just discussing, the kidney window scene. This is one of the other like scarier kill sequences to me. I think like the thought of being on a set after hours when all the lights are off, and then, having the killer kind of stalk her with this camera and film the whole thing. It just is really scary. And something about them watching it in the screening room, the day after, and they're not sure if it's real or not. It just is really gritty, and even though you don't see any gore, I think just the implication of like hearing her scream and hearing kind of the sounds of the slashing, like that she's getting real messed up with that knife. And I think it's one of those instances where I'm okay with not seeing the gore kind of head on, because I think my imagination makes it worse. Like all you're seeing is this shaky camera like POV of the murder, which I thought was really interesting.
Well, I mean, that's the ultimate. There's more than one, but that's certainly a very Hitchcock kill.
Yeah.
It's Psycho in the shower,
Mm-hmm.
because what it is. It's about her getting sliced with a straight blade instead of, and we don't really see Janet Leigh getting killed. We hear it, in
Right.
Psycho in the shower, and then so that's basically what we see and hear. I mean, it's a direct. I don't want to say it's a rip. It's a lift. It's a inspired by that type of kill on screen, while other people are watching it on screen, so they don't and it can't be that obvious, like it can't be that gory, because they don't know if it's real or not. So I think it's a double
Right.
blend of taking taking some inspiration from how Hitchcock killed Janet Leigh in the shower, because it's all sound and it's cuts, what was 72 cuts or whatever, and then just with sound, and it became iconic. And so I think that was kind of I don't want to say homage, but sort of like an homage to that. But it worked great when they're in the screening room and they don't. When they were watching it, like I said, I'd never seen them. I'm like, oh, they're going to splice in that footage right here,
Mm-hmm.
and it works. And I think it's a great reaction between Mayfield and her going, "What is this?" And then I was like, "Watch, everybody's going to cheer because they think that's the best
Yep.
take."
That's like
And
the best
obviously, you're
acting
like,
she's ever
"Yay!" And so
done.
that's how it goes, right?
I love that. I love that the special effects guys, their reaction is there's not enough blood.
not,
Like I love
not
the
enough
idea
blood.
that you would work on or just watch enough horror movies that you don't have an understanding of like what that would look like in real life. And so that was really funny to me.
Yeah, I think it's a great sequence though, and we talk about the window scene and that whole sequence being kind of setting the bar. I don't think this one's that far behind.
Yeah, this is one of the better ones.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump over to probably my second favorite character of the entire movie. Let's talk about Reese, played by Loretta Devine. I fucking love her. I love her in everything that she's in. I loved her in the first movie, and this movie like would have suffered so much more had she not been in it. What did you guys think of her character in this one?
Yeah, I completely agree. I love her in this movie and in the first one. I think this is a really great thread connecting this movie to the first movie, because otherwise there's not really, other than at the end when you get that little cameo of the original killer, which is great, by the way. I love that whole little nod there at the end. But other than that, there's not really a lot connecting these two movies. And so I really liked that they had Reese come back, and she's just so funny. She's like great comic relief, but she's also such a badass. Like she's so determined. She's like always trying to do the right thing and like save the day. She actually pretty much ends up saving the day in both movies, which I think is great. Like she's just the hero.
Yeah, multiple times she comes in at the right moment, which is also a little misdirect. Red Hand was like, okay, is this the through line? Is We've seen it
Yeah.
before where a survivor of an original movie becomes the killer in the next one because of the traumatic experience or just the thrill of it or whatever. So you give a little of that tinge because she's a little iffy in the car at the beginning, but then she goes, "Yeah, urban legend, my ass." Um, and of course, it's Loretta Devine, so you're going to get all of Loretta Devine,
Yes.
and it's just enough out of there, to have kind of that comedy relief or that lightheartedness when you're trying to make a serious movie that you shouldn't take too seriously.
Right.
Um, and I think my favorite part with Reese in this movie is when Mayfield is running and she's down in the kind of tunnel, and then of course you get that kind of running into that kind of jump scare, and Mayfield's is like, "Wait, how did you find me?" And it's a great. She goes and she just points to the camera. She goes, "Duh!" Like,
Yeah.
I'm the security guard. I'm like, "Duh!" We just had this established, and we have all these cameras. And she's like, "Oh, okay." Because then it takes. She's like, "Dumbass!
I love
I
that.
saw you on camera."
All right. Any last thoughts on Loretta before we jump over to my main man?
No, I'm
No, I
ready.
think
I'm ready.
Yeah, I think you let Loretta Devine just be Loretta. Like you can, you can't service it. Like you just let Loretta Devine be Loretta Devine.
All right, let's get to the meat. Let's get to my favorite. Let's get to Hart Bachner, who played Professor Solomon. Of course, we all know him from Supergirl 1984. We know him as Ellis in Die Hard, and of course, I know him even more from Terror Train. What did you guys think of our ultimate Urban Legends Final Cut villain, Professor Solomon?
Okay, so I think his motive is so silly, but
It
it
is.
doesn't make me like this movie less. But I think what I think is so funny. Okay, so for those who haven't seen this movie, his whole thing is that he once was a film student at this school and he was up for the Hitchcock Award, and the panel of judges were all tied between him and this other guy, and so a guest judge had to be the tiebreaker, and the guest judge just happened to be the dad of our main character, and he picked the other guy, effectively ruining the career of Professor Solomon. So now he has resigned himself to just working at the college. So what I wonder is, like, I'm going to present two scenarios and you tell me what you think is easier. A, you steal the film of your star pupil, you murder him and every single person involved in the crew, and then you just stick different like credits on it and make it your own? Or do you just simply make
Yes.
your own movie in the 20 plus years you've had working at a film school with tons of resources and equipment at your disposal? That was extra funny to me, and I really thought it was such a burn at the end when the main girl says, "Those who can't do teach," because it's like, you idiot, you've just made this whole mess and killed all these people because you just couldn't go make a movie like using all of this equipment that you had. So I thought that was extra funny. He's not exactly, I mean, I don't know, I think as a character he's fine. He's definitely scarier with the mask on than with the mask off. Then he's just kind of pathetic
Ah,
at that point.
you're killing me.
Yeah, I think I, I think maybe it's the final culmination of 20 years or whatever it is that he can no longer take it.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of set up a little bit in the opening scene in his office where the other professor is, I'm the historian guy and I'm going to talk about French cinema and mise en scène and verite, because that's what everybody wants to talk about when they think they're talking about filmmaking. And actually filmmakers don't ever say cinema verite or mise en scène.
No.
They never say that. You only read it in books. And no one should ever say those 5 words ever.
No.
And if you're talking about filmmaking, and I think that he's had to endure that shit for so long with it, and that's actually a great little scene because he's like, "No, please come in, get him out of here,"
Yeah.
Yeah.
and she's, "Oh, I'll come back." He's like, "No, no, no," and I also he plays in that first scene. I think is his best kind of scene in that office scene with her because she's like, "I come up with this idea of urban legends and making a movie about it," and he goes, "That's," and you expect him to go really dumb, and he goes, "That's pretty cool."
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And much to the chagrin of the verite mise en scène guy, who's having that obvious conversation almost internally about, well, the mere definition of verite means there is no mise en scène. And like, why are you voicing this? You know, and it's so grating, but it's really funny. And you know, so he's supportive, and you know, he plays it, I think, just right to where you think he's suspect, but he's also like, no, I'm nurturing my students and letting them run with their ideas and all that. But I think you can understand why he cracks after a while. And Katie, to answer your question of why didn't over the 10, 20, whatever the timeline was, that he didn't just make a movie, because he can't, because he sucks.
Yeah, he's actually just bad at filmmaking, and that really is
He
the answer.
just
That's the
sucks.
hard truth here.
And I think the other funny kind of cliche or stereotype is that he got so mad that the tiebreaker was from a documentarian.
Oh, yeah, that is
Right.
extra
Yeah.
hilarious. Like, they keep the way that they keep, like, subtly, like, talking down the idea of being a documentary filmmaker is very funny.
Right, right. I think most kids out of film school would be like, I would rather not make it in this industry if my only other choice is winning a Golden Globe for a documentary. I think there's a lot of people that think that up until the last like 5 years, because now everybody just makes documentaries.
Right. What are you trying to say?
I've always liked documentaries. I've never been a hater.
I love documentaries. I watch more documentaries than actual, like, narrative fictional movies half the time.
Thank God for streamers or and online stuff because like there's a place for them now. You can just drone on and have 24 hours of docs.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait for midnight on Fridays on IFC.
Yeah.
There's actually two docs that I watch religiously. I watch them in rotation, like maybe every couple months. I'll throw it back on because I love them so fucking much. And that's the death of Superman Lives, and
Oh yeah.
the documentary about the Roger Corman Fantastic Four movie. Um, I fucking love documentaries, especially on shit like that, man. So yeah, I hate anybody that downs docs.
Yeah.
I think Death of Superman Limbs is kind of in a class of its own because uh, John Peters doesn't know they're rolling the camera on purpose to make him look like a total dick.
Oh man, I love it though.
And John Peters is just eating it up. And I think that's the epitome of all the other characters we were talking about in this film school of what they want to get into this industry for. Because they want to be a famous producer or studio head. And then
Right.
someone like John Peters is a famous studio head. And the only studio heads he actually knows what he's doing are the ones he was spraying, you know, with hair product because he was, you know, he was a hairstylist and
Hairdresser.
then
Yeah.
became a studio head, which is a fantastic character arc in a crazy movie, but it's real life. And he thinks the camera's on him because it's about him. And I love that little, it's no, we're actually gonna, I could just feel the filmmaker just leading out the rope and John Peters is just taking and wrapping around his own neck the whole time. And then he doesn't even need someone else to yank it. Like Peters just jumps off the deck and it's like, oh my God, this is great.
It is so
And
good.
you couldn't write that. You couldn't write that in a narrative. But anyway, are we done on Heart Caution or like we went off on a tangent there? It's your guy, Matt. It's your guy.
Yeah, I know. But you know what? We're talking about filmmakers, and everything. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Let's talk about John Ottman, who, weirdly enough, was mostly a composer before this movie. And then, of course, this was,
Mhm.
I think, his maybe directorial debut. I think maybe he did like one short film prior to this, but this
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
led him on to doing more. Other than, he's of course been a producer and an editor as well. And so let's talk about John Ottman, the director of the movie. What did you guys think?
Yeah, so I mean, he's gone on, he's mainly been a composer. Like that's what he's known, like that's kind of like the top billed thing when you look him up. And he did all the, the music for this movie as well. Um, you know, I thought this was a well directed movie. Like I really have no complaints. There's nothing. Everything about this movie is like pretty well made. Like there might be like some nitpicky things with like plot points and whatnot, but like just strictly on the technical side of things, I thought this was done really well. I really like the way a lot of the scenes were shot and composed. And yeah, I mean, no complaints from me. I thought he did a good job with this one. And looking at his IMDb, it looks like he didn't really go on to direct many more movies after this. This was kind of one of his only movies behind the helm. So he mainly is just a composer now.
Which, who knows if that is a direct result of this movie doing well or not doing well or not getting any of the offers, or maybe he didn't want to direct anymore. He's like, you know what, I'm going to stick to writing scores, even though he did a good job. I agree. I think you had mentioned something earlier about pacing, and I think this movie is serviceable on its pacing and what they don't have in there and what they do have in there. And maybe that's a payoff for being a composer,
Hmm.
because a composer wants to get a final cut of a movie that is about as perfectly timed and length as you want, because he's like, oh my god, I gotta fill 30 seconds of nothing here with some music. This director sucks. So maybe he took his composing acumen into the director's chair
Right.
and made things work. But you also mentioned, accurately, that he did. I thought the score of this movie, well, shit, it better have been good because it's done by a veteran composer. But it serviced, I think, everything that you wanted, and there's even the Hitchcock theme at the end. I mean, it's really an homage movie about making a movie inside of a movie about making a movie.
Yes.
And so I
Right.
think everybody knows this, and I think he knows that, and didn't it, it was he didn't take it too seriously, but wanted, because you can fuck that up
Yeah.
Yeah.
very easy. He didn't get campy. I thought the music, which is interesting, especially with horror or suspenseful movies, if the score or the sound is, if you're noticing it, it's too much. But if it's not there, the movie sucks. Like we've all, experienced that. And so I think there's a lot, almost have to go back and watch this movie again and only listen to what's going on audio wise with score and the beats, and it's all the perfect composing tropes for suspense, the chase scene, the shrills, the bangs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So he knew exactly what he wanted and where it needed to be, and that's why it totally worked. And I think that's where, the whole movie flows okay for you. I mean, I think that was a good choice. Like, he didn't have to compose it himself, but I'm sure he was like, I'm not gonna not compose this,
Yeah.
Right.
which is very smart, and I think he wins for that decision. But speaking of Ottman, yeah, he didn't direct any of these. He went on to compose a lot more things. And Matt, here's your next connection.
Uh-oh.
He actually goes on to compose two Shane Black movies, being Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and The Nice Guys. And Kiss Kiss Bang Bang is my favorite Shane Black movie. Um, and so I think there's a cool connection for me
That's a
happening to be
definite
on this
connection.
episode
Yeah.
and talking
Yeah.
about that with you. Even though I'm related to some people, tangentially, this is, a little bit more direct and cool because I like those two movies. And he's done some other cool stuff in genre and not.
Hmm.
And then there's also, I mean, we won't get, when you talk about the screenwriters, which were very young at this time and new to the game, all film school people, I think I'm obviously USC guy. So there's a little bit of, I just got out of USC and now I'm gonna make a movie, like, you know, giving the middle finger to film schools. And so it has that little bit in there because USC is obviously the crown jewel, and that's what they were trying to make, in this, Anytown, USA, shot in Canada campus.
Right.
And but with Derrickson and Boardman, a cool thing, and I don't know if this was just organic or not. We'll get back to Ottman. I'll let you. But my other thing that I noticed is in the background there's an original "The Day the Earth Stood Still" poster,
Yeah.
and Derrickson ended up directing that, and Boardman was the producer on the remake, which I actually like the remake. I love the original, but the remake I'm actually okay with, even though everybody says it sucked. I was like, it actually doesn't suck. It's a pretty good movie, and so that was a neat
I didn't know
kind of
that. That's so
futuristic
cool.
tie. And the fact that, I mean, I know socially Derrickson, like I said, I know Cargill much, much more because I've known him, more. But I've hung out with Derrickson, and I've met him numerous times, and I like that duo. I was like, oh, that's a cool tie-in. I just noticed that, there's a day the Earth stood still, so and then these two writers go on to make the remake.
That's so
That
cool.
is cool.
I'm a big fan of Scott Derrickson. Like he went on to write and direct The Exorcism of Emily Rose and Sinister, and more recently the Doctor Strange Marvel movie. And I love all of those movies. Like especially Sinister is one of my favorite horror movies, like of like the modern era. And so I had no idea that he had written this movie until I was looking up stuff for it. So that was a really pleasant surprise for me as a fan of his.
Yeah, and that's what's fun about stuff like that. I love that, and like I said, I've known Cargill for a long who co-wrote, Sinister
Yeah.
and Doctor Strange, and I think Doctor Strange is probably my favorite Marvel movie just because of the subject matter, and I mean, he's good as that character. I think it works. Um, and again, like first, I admit it, I'm a fan of the remake of The Day the Earth Stood Still.
I liked it too.
I there's I dug it. I thought it was okay. And the first one's obviously classic and really good, and very and should be taken note of because I do want to see Gort standing in Central Park one day, ready to fry the earth if we don't get our shit together. And, and so, but I thought it was a neat tie-in. But I mean, always it's interesting that Boardman and Derek, they've actually stuck together, throughout the years, which sometimes happens and sometimes it doesn't happen in this industry. But I think it's sort of it also ties in. What's interesting is that these kids in Final Cut end up working together when they're out of school, and obviously the Joey Lawrence character and Mayfield probably have they go on and win awards, right? And she's like, I'd like to thank my agent, you know on her acceptance speeches 10 years down the road. To see something like Boardman and Derrickson produce and make movies 10 years down the road from this one, which is I don't know if they had a time machine or knew what was going to happen, but I thought that was pretty cool.
So I just want to throw out there, again, like, it shows really where my mind is at when I'm sitting there jotting down notes while watching the movie. So we were talking about John Ottman, and of course how he's a composer, and I wrote down all the movies that I, off the top of my head, knew that he composed. So like Halloween H2O, Apt Pupil, Lake Placid, X-Men 2, Gothica, Superman Returns, X-Men Days of Future Past, X-Men Apocalypse. Like this dude is like scored some like big heavy shit, but
Yeah.
surprisingly enough, did we're talking about the composer, we didn't mention that he's also a fucking editor, and he has edited movies like the first X-Men movie, Usual Suspects, Superman Returns, and I think most recently was Bohemian Rhapsody. So the dude,
Yeah.
I think he's also, yeah. So the dude is kind of well. I mean, he only directed once for this movie, but other than being composer, like he's gone on to do a lot of other stuff. But speaking of Scott Derrickson and Boardman, I want to throw out that I think one of their, I don't know, it was after this. I can't remember what year. It's like maybe 2003. So it had been 3 years after this. They co-wrote Hellraiser Inferno, which is one of the lesser Hellraiser sequels. Um, and you know me, I love my schlocky shit. And I love the
I love
Hellraiser shit
Hellraiser.
sequels. So that one is most people kind of hate that one, but that one's really far up the bar for me because of how different and crazy it was. So I really love that these guys, like Andre saying, is doing so much stuff now and still together, but they have such big horror roots, and they're able to inject the horror into the mainstream stuff they do now. Because let's face it, Doctor Strange is straight up a glossy horror movie. Just because it has Marvel on it, people don't seem to realize that that's a fucking horror movie for sure.
Well, I think it's also a testament, if we're talking about Ottman, on most people will go, "Oh yeah, that guy that directed the sequel to Urban Legends, that movie sucked, and like that's why he never worked again." And I was like, and I would in turn go, "Excuse me, I may interject here. This guy actually has a stellar career doing things that are very skilled technical jobs, like composing and editing. Oh, and by the way, the composer on some of these huge movies is probably making more money than the director they hired.
Yeah.
By
Oh,
the way,
absolutely.
just so you know." And what people don't realize is how much money composers make, on a regular, kind of industry standard. And I'm not going to put that number out there, but if you know what it is, then you understand what I'm talking about. And they usually get paid by the minute of music they're creating. So
Right.
just add
Yeah.
up whatever number you think by, a 2 hour movie. And if you've got an hour and a half of score in there, that's an okay living. And if you're
Mhm.
cranking out these giant studio movies like Ottman's been doing, he like I said, he may not want to direct, because you know what? That's a pain in the ass. It's always your fault when something happens. It's hard to get directing jobs. And it's if you make a dud, it's a thankless job. If you make a hit, everybody thinks it's all because of you. And maybe he's like, you know what? I'm a really good composer and I'm a pretty good editor. I'm going to stick with that and make other people look good and get paid for it.
Yeah, I think this movie is a really great like combination of all of these skill sets that he had. Like you said, so what he didn't go on to direct. He's been hugely successful doing, like you said, jobs that sometimes pay a lot more or require even more like skill and attention to detail. And this is just a great combination of like, this is why this movie still holds up, by the way, in my opinion. Like, what, people, you might have nitpicky things about the plot or certain aspects of it, but you can't say it's a poorly made film. Like, it's well paced, it's well directed, and the score works. Like, it's a great like underscore for the movie, and it really drives the action. So I think that's what really makes this movie successful, is because he knew all of these things going into directing it. Like, he knew, he was already thinking about editing and already thinking about composing as he's making it. It's not an afterthought, or it's not having to like hire somebody that you've never worked with before and try to explain your vision to them. It was all there in his head already.
I think I just came up with a scenario in Ottman's head that's like, yeah, I'm a composer, and then he goes, oh yeah, directing. Oh yeah, watch this, I can do that.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to try it. Oh yeah, knocked it out of the yeah. Oh, you know what? Okay, I see what everybody's talking about. Not that big of a deal. Like, I'll go do. I'd rather go challenge myself.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that was the thing. But I don't know. I mean, look, you got to give credit where credit is due, and I think we are in the right places. So I think that's what it's about.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have to throw out because I didn't get to say too much about what I thought about his directing and stuff. And Katie, you said that he thought it was very well constructed. I gotta say, the chase scenes between the killer and Mayfield, like I thought they were some of the best chase scenes from
Yeah.
that era of horror films. Like they're really well constructed, and I mean that's also a testament to the DP of the movie, of course. But no, I thought it was really, really well done. And we keep saying, he probably didn't want to, maybe he didn't want to go on to do more stuff. But it's stuff like that and some of the character moments that makes you almost wish that he maybe would have done either more movies or at least something else of this caliber.
And maybe he got it all out of his system, like in
Yeah.
this one movie,
True.
because obviously, yeah, you have to give credit to you do give credit to the DP where credit is due, as you should. But especially in the first act, we are jam packed with I don't say homages, but lifts and inspirations from classic horror movies, being a setup or a lighting technique. Like when we right before we meet Loretta Devine and Mayfield's just walking, that's so Hitchcock, because then we even have the birds fly in as a little jump scare. We've got the spotlight in the eyes. We've got up in the bell tower that, looking down the spiral stair. That's a Vertigo thing. I mean, it's like there's so much crammed in there that I don't think most people even know. And, or if you've even seen a bunch of Hitchcock, that you would realize it was being done to you. And I was
Right.
trying to figure out in there, I may have to think about it more of like, is there a rope homage in this movie too? Because what's interesting in the script, when Professor Solomon is talking about her idea, he's like, oh, you can pull out, there's a lot of Hitchcock in there. And it's so blatant, but he starts naming some really obscure Hitchcock movies. He doesn't name The Birds and Psycho and all that, which is what we actually get the visual cues from.
Mhm.
So I think the underlying stuff is all brought through from the dialogue and the script, and then the visuals are brought in. We're just watching this giant mashup of classic horror movies in what unfortunately turned out to be a 90s movie, because we know what those are. They have the same feel. And the only thing that like, you could almost remake this movie shot for shot with maybe some different wardrobe, and it's a totally different movie,
Yeah.
Right.
but
Yeah.
it's exactly the same. And people are like, oh my god, did you get that Vertigo reference? Like, yeah, but no one did in the 90s.
Yeah, it's just
Right.
covered up by
Right.
middle parts and oversized
What's
leather
that?
jackets. So
And yes, and a lot of roll neck J. Crew sweaters.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if here's a costuming thing for filmmakers out there. If you're trying for a 90s aesthetic, yes, you got to have that 3/4 length leather car coat, but it only works if your sweater sleeve comes out from underneath the jacket sleeve.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're failing.
That's a very good important tidbit.
And don't forget the hair gel.
And
All
khaki.
right.
Hair
Yes.
gel, yeah.
All right, so we've talked about our director, composer. We've talked about our writers. Let's just for a real brief one, let's talk about Brian Pearson, the DP. I know he went on to do things like the Final Destination Part 5, Drive Angry, My Bloody Valentine 3D. I thought he did a really good job in this film. What do you guys think of the cinematography?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we kind of touched on it when talking about the director, and I think it's good to give credit where credit's due, because a lot of times, some of these great shots, it's from the mind of the DP. Like, they're the ones that sometimes take the script and say, "Hey, I see us doing it this way. Let's try it." So, we'll never know exactly who made what exact decision for the specific shots, but overall, I mean, I love the way this movie is shot. I agree about the chase sequences. They're all really great. I think there's a lot of, I don't know, I really like this setting, and I feel like the cinematography like uses the setting in a way that is interesting. And yeah, it's one of those things where sometimes I feel like unless cinematography does something especially like outlandish, like if the lighting is super intense and technicolor, like a Suspiria type movie or something like that, or if it does these really intense crazy zooms and angles, people tend to notice that. But similar to what we were saying when we were talking about the score, like sometimes not like explicitly noticing it is a good thing. It means that they're doing it right. It means you're being immersed in the movie and you're not critiquing every single shot. So while there aren't necessarily like some crazy standout like super artsy shots in this movie, I think it's all done really well, and I really like the way they put it together.
No doubt. And obviously it's interesting because we almost seem like we're talking about this movie. We're surprised that it's good because we think it was a bunch of indie filmmakers making this movie. But these are all consummate studio
Yes.
professionals in a big budget studio movie in the 90s, which was the heyday of spending a ton of money on stuff. And then they were like, wait a minute, we can make more money if we actually squeeze blood from the stone. So yeah, Stan, you only have a half an hour now. But all these people, including the DP, like these are all like, they're not getting their jobs unless they know what they're doing. It wasn't like hiring some kid right out of film school to, hey, let's give this guy a chance on a $30 million studio movie. But I think I like, obviously the DP always brings something of their own to it. And whether the director goes, hey man, I want you to just create all the looks and I trust you, or they sit down for weeks and storyboard and come up with ideas. And I think it was more of that because we have the script and so much Hitchcock and classic, black and white, even noir movie type stuff in this
Mhm.
film.
Mhm.
with the lighting and that camera angles and feel depth of field type things, and just angles, right, and the way actors move in front of the camera. And I think Ottman and I think they sat down and was like, hey, the shot, like nothing's more boring than Matthew Davis on a porch drinking from a bottle of Southern Mash or whatever it is, right? But you have the basic shot, and you get the medium, and then you get the close up. But then as the scene progresses, if you're paying attention, on that character, the camera's tilting, he's going a little bit more to the side in the bottom corner, and that's all intentional to set a mood. And like you said, Katie, if you notice it, you're doing it wrong. And you almost have to watch things for a second time with a through that lens, no pun intended, to, or either listen to the score every, just key or focus on one thing. And I've noticed that I like to watch movies, I like to just absorb myself in it and just dive into the experience. But I'm also fascinated by the technical acumen of people and the artistry of people. And that really only started, probably 20 years ago for me. Because I used to be like, I don't want to hear about behind the scenes stuff. I hate special features. I just want to escape into the movie. But then I watch it from a like now, and I'm like, that's a great shot, or that was great. You watch it from a different lens, and
Right.
I'm not sure if it wasn't. I'm not trying to get insert myself into the reasoning of it too much, but I've been around screenings of a lot of Monster Squad screenings since 2006, and you can only watch the movie so many times.
Right.
And but we enjoy standing off to the side or up in the booth or listening to people, the reactions, especially if you're doing a Q&A or a thing, because you get the things. But for a number of times when this whole resurgence started, we'd stand off to the side or stand in the back, and I started watching this movie. And obviously, look, if anybody tells you different, they are lying. If you're an actor in your movie, you're watching yourself, right? You're not watching anything
Right.
else. You're going to watch yourself. Whether you like to look at yourself or you hate the sound of your own voice, like I do most of the time through Monster Squad. But then I was like, you know what? I know exactly what I'm doing here. I've seen this a million times. I started watching other people, like really keying on other people, even when I was on screen, and watching little reactions or how they delivered lines. And then I started really listening to Bruce Broughton's score. And then I really started paying attention to the set design and the mise en scène. And the I will flog myself later, and that means like not not.
Yes.
Hang on a
I
minute.
got
Let's
you. I
just
got you.
wait.
I got
Edit,
you.
edit that. Edit that. Edit that.
I am not.
The
I am not.
But then I started really watching the photography of Monster Squad, and when you key on that, you realize that there's some really fucking good camera work in the Monster Squad that you've never really noticed before, because it doesn't take you out of the movie. It doesn't take you
Right.
out of the experience. It it draws you even more in. And that's a testament to Bradford May, who happened to be the DP of Monster Squad, who I had actually worked with on an episode of Twilight Zone prior to Monster Squad. And then Brad went on to make a ton of stuff, and he's a fantastic DP. And there's some really cool shots in Monster Squad that you don't really know are really cool shots. And my whole point of that is I wasn't trying to make it about me or Monster Squad, but it was about watching something like Urban Legends Final Cut and noticing those things as you're watching
Right.
it. And it really is a testament to the people that make movies.
Yeah, I think I really love it's one of the things I love about finding a movie that you can watch multiple times. Like I think a lot of movies deserve more than one watch because like you said, the first time you watch something you really want to be immersed in it. You don't want to be like nitpicking the production and trying to like think about why they did XYZ. You just want to like experience the story. But it's so fun. Like there's so many movies that I've seen countless times that it's like every time I watch it I'll find something new or I'll notice something like new in the background to appreciate, like the score, like a certain camera angle or a choice for lighting, or even like a background like extra might have a really great reaction that you didn't notice the first time, and it just adds to the enjoyment. So I think that's just why I love movies in general, because it's not just a one and done deal. You can always revisit these stories and find something else like to peel back and see the next layer underneath. So it's definitely something I appreciate.
Yeah, and I think this. I don't know how many. I think you can go back and watch this movie more than once.
Yeah.
Definitely more than once. I don't know if you watch it every Thursday, but like some people have their Thursday night or put it on while they're vacuuming. And we all have our own movies that if it's on, you're watching it, or you will put on just because you fucking want to watch it.
Yeah.
And like you said, for different reasons, Katie. I mean, you said it perfectly. It could be because of the score, or it could be because of the dialogue, or it could be because of the performances. I certainly have those movies that are my all-time favorites, and some are new. Like some of my all-time favorite movies are fairly new, and if they're on, I gotta watch. I can't. You're like my day's done. I'm watching it,
Yeah.
even if I come in halfway, because it's so compelling to me. And if you have a combination of storytelling, writing, and performance, and kind of what the movie looks like, or something like that. I mean, that is an effective combination. And I've noticed, as I started talking about more of these movies over time, because I've done, I don't know, 7,000 podcasts in the last 6 months, and I enjoy it thoroughly. There's nothing. Look, Andre Gower talking. Everybody knows I talk way too much, including Andre Gower, and but I'm always I always feel like I'm celebrating something, and think my ideas are good, and sometimes they're not, but that's okay. And but I love that about movies. I don't want to be all like gushy about movies, because some movies suck, but that's really what's interesting about movies or cinema. And look, I'm a TV fiend. I am a TV junkie. I love TV almost more than I like movies. But there's some movies, boy, that I'll tell you that are just cracking.
Well, before we start giving our kind of final thoughts on the movie, I thought, we can go on to our next section, which we usually talk about, like the makeup effects in the movie and kind of what we thought about it. And I think in this case, it's not really effects heavy. Like there's definitely some, like we talked about the kidney wound getting like peeled back. That's probably one of like the gnarliest special effects in this movie. But other than that, it's a little light on the gore, but I do think some of these kills were still fun, even if they weren't necessarily like elaborate. But what did you guys think of some of the kills and some of the makeup effects that they used in this movie?
So I just want to jump in and say that while there was not a lot of effects in this movie, there was some great motherfuckers behind the camera doing these effects. Some guys that I know of, some guys that I know. So Lars Anderson, who of course worked on Ghostbusters, Poltergeist 2, Predator 2, Daniel Gibson, who did Friday 13th the series, X Men, Incredible Hulk, Matthew Mungle, who worked on The Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, Class of 1999, Kindred. He also did I Know What You Did Last Summer, and I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. And Francois D'Angino, The Blob, Land of the Dead, Silent Hill, the Friday 13th the
Oh
series,
wow.
Dawn of the Dead, Saw 2 through 7. So there was some real, like, we talked about the cast being like up and comers who really went on to do big and better things. But the effects crew on this movie has done some amazing shit, some of my favorite shit. Um, so while there wasn't a lot on screen, I would say to really justify like you know a standout, other than maybe the like I said the window stuff, the crew behind the scenes are fucking amazing.
Well, I agree, and I think it goes back to we were talking about it earlier. Like this was a big budget studio movie. Like like I think we all still have this. Like, oh my god, like that really worked, because we're not watching a student film, and we're not watching like this. We're not watching a Lifetime movie that was made for 300 grand. It's a big budget movie, and you get these consummate professionals. And Katie, you mentioned like, yeah, we have the kidney scar and the digging in, but we don't linger on it too much.
Mhm.
Like if this was a lesser filmmaker, we would have seen it peeled back and had sound effects. We don't need that. We know that would fucking hurt.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so less is more, especially in horror and especially in gore, because it's about what you're imagining, which makes it terrifying, and then instead of what you're seeing. And when you see it too long, or you linger on an effect, or a gut's coming out and someone's pulling out the spaghetti, guts or whatever, you're like, okay, got it. And you can tell it's rubber. You don't want to tell it's real. You want to think like it's real. But yeah, I think on almost all the kills, even the window sequence, the only one that was weak was the bashing with the lens, but
Yeah.
the or weak-ish, and then getting electrified, and then we see the prosthetic, like that was probably 2 hours of putting that on the
Yeah.
actor, for a 2-second shot, which I know all about that. Like I literally did 2 hours of makeup for a friend of mine's short film as Dead Alien number 3. It's my favorite credit, my favorite character name I've ever had. And to get dropped on the ground in front of the camera for literally a second and a half. It was like 2 hours of makeup. It was
Right.
fantastic.
I'm just wondering, this movie was made in like 1999, released in the year 2000. If maybe they're, like I said, this is a list of very talented effects guys. I'm just wondering if maybe they didn't shoot more, but just because of ratings boards and stuff like that, because the ratings boards were a lot more strict then than they are
Oh
now.
yeah.
Just wondering if maybe there was maybe more to these death scenes that we didn't see because of the rating.
What was the rating when it released?
I believe it was.
It,
I think it was
it was
always R.
it's just R. It wasn't an NC-17.
No, yeah, it
No,
definitely because
It
it,
was
it
just
it did
R.
come to theaters. Yeah.
Right. So, and it doesn't have any gratuitous nudity. It may have, and it got cut,
Hmm.
or it doesn't have gratuitous sex. It has a little bit. We see Matthew Davis's butt or a butt double, which you don't need it in this movie. Even though it is a college movie, you have a little bit of the sexy stuff, like in the airplane, because obviously that guy's going to put a Mile High Club reference in,
Of
and of
course.
course Dorothy goes, "Oh, they want to be in the Mile High Club," and I'm like, "Okay, mom," and but they did it, and then they got out of it because they had the little joke with the lipstick saying, and he's like, "You damn right," which is funny.
Yeah.
And but like I said, I think less is more, and you don't need it. And the movie gets on. Like you could linger on that stuff and it could have changed your rating or just made the movie longer and more boring.
Yeah. I agree.
the "you're going down" scene is fucking brilliant. I love that.
Yeah, it's so funny.
And then it's even more funny when you get the reveal that they're shooting a student movie.
Yeah, like you definitely start out that movie being like, where is this going? Like on the airplane, and like who is this guy in a suit with a knife? Like this definitely isn't related to the first movie at all. And then yeah, the little
Right.
surprise at the end there that it's just a movie within a movie is pleasant.
It, and then what's really funny, there's a throwaway line that I think it's Joey Lawrence's when the actor, like the slasher on the plane, he's supposed to be this established professional actor, and Toby goes, "I'm sorry, dude. She'll get better, right?" And he goes, "This girl's acting, wouldn't be good in a porno,"
Right.
and then walks off camera. And so that's the joke. I think it's Joey Lawrence again because he's like sitting on a dolly in the background. He goes, uh, "Actually, it's not much better," or
Yeah.
something like because he goes, "I've seen her in two. It's not that much better." And
That's
you're like, "Wait a minute,
hilarious.
what is happening here?"
And talking about this movie, the fact that it's just about making movies and about film students, like it definitely anybody that's ever, even if you've never like professionally worked in the film industry, like anybody who's ever just like made a movie with their friends for fun or had to do it for a project for school, like there's things about that you can see reflected in this movie. And that is that's another thing that I really like. It just feels like familiar and comforting.
And yeah, I think definitely, and it's definitely representative of an era because I was actually talking to Henry McComas, my good friend and cohort in crime on Wolfman's Got Nards, who was basically producer, DP, editor, filmmaker, shooter, scorer, sound mixer, colorist, filmmaker all around. And I mentioned that we were going to talk about Final Cut, and he goes, "Oh, Derrickson's first screen," and then he started talking about. I'm like, "You're such a movie nerd,
Yes.
Jesus Christ!" And so he starts talking about urban legends too, because he's right in that era. Like this is his era because he's much younger than I am. And we started talking about it, and we were talking about things like that. And but it's fun stuff and making. But he goes that movie. His quote was that movie was what I thought film school was gonna be like. I thought it was gonna be a filmmaker romantically fingering the mixing board and bringing up dialogue and score, and he goes, "And then I got to film school," I was like, "That shit ain't real."
Yeah.
And then it made me realize that this movie does date itself with that, like, with the gear,
Mhm.
with the camera gear, with the mixing board. I was like, "That you do all that shit on your iPad now." It's like, you're
Yeah.
not like, n you're not touching any buttons.
I love when Joey Lawrence is like, I can call my dad and we can go digital, and somebody's like, "Digital
Yeah.
sucks."
Yeah, well, that's a great exchange because they
Yes.
get into the whole thing where Lucas and he's like, "Fuck Lucas,"
Yes.
because that's right when the that's is it this is 90 made in '99. It was right when the special edition the re-release of the originals, right?
You would have been
Because Phantom
around
Menace hadn't come
98.
out yet, right?
98, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, when did
Phantom
Phantom Menace
Menace
come
was
out?
like
Phantom Menace
1999,
was
I think?
99.
So almo Okay, so same time-ish, but we had seen the prequels, and Lucas had fucked with the originals,
Yeah.
and us OGs hated that digital shit, and so I love that exchange because it's so indicative of that couple years, and we're having that argument, but it's a great line, "Oh, I can call my dad, we can go digital," and he's like, "We can make your movie in 3 days." It would almost be interesting. I don't like commentaries or I don't like because I enjoy movies too much. I want to lose myself into the story. I don't want to see. I don't like BTS shit. I don't like commentaries. But this would be an interesting commentary, either with the writers or Ottman about every shot.
Yeah,
That would be kind of
I would
cool.
love
That
to
would be cool.
hear, I would love to hear, like a Scott Derrickson commentary, like, all these years later and hear what he thinks about this one.
Yeah, that'd be. I don't know. Let's tweet him. Like,
Yeah.
say he should do that.
Yeah, let's do that, let's hit him up.
He's on the Twitter. He's on the Twitter all the time.
Yeah,
They're busy making like a big Blumhouse movie right
of
now. Damn
course.
it. But whatever. But yeah, no, I think that's interesting about this, and I think going into it, everybody thinks Urban Legends, the sequel to Urban Legend, like that was terrible. And I love when people can revisit something and go, maybe it wasn't as sucky as I thought it was,
Yeah.
and maybe us three have helped them come to that epiphany.
I hope so. I hope yeah, if anyone's listening to this, I mean, I know a lot of people like you said, this is definitely a movie that even if you haven't seen it, it might be something that you've heard of and you just assume that it's crappy. Like I feel like horror sequels just get a bad rep in general. But yeah, if you're listening to this and you haven't seen it, it's and you like slashers, it's worth a watch for sure.
Absolutely. So let's get right here towards the end. Andre, give me your final thoughts on Urban Legends Final Cut. Would you recommend it?
Because of the reasons that we were all just saying, and kind of how Katie just wrapped it up perfectly. Yeah, I absolutely is like, you know what? You should probably watch this movie and don't go into it with the pre preconceived notions like Katie was alluding to. Go into it open and understanding that you're actually going to catch a lot of stuff that most audience members that went to the mall in 2000 or 99 to see this movie did not catch.
Right.
Just like there's a ton of stuff in like you go see the remake of House of Wax and you're just like, I just want to see Paris Hilton get killed.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's like, no, watch what they're doing with the movie making of the movie and go like, hey, it's on Tubi. It's if you own it, or rent it and support the filmmakers. And and then here, damn it, go in and post about it or review it on Rotten Tomatoes. Like all that shit matters now. It really
Yeah.
does. And the filmmakers will appreciate it. I know I would if people go and even watch, like right now, Wolfman's Got Nards, whether they liked it or didn't like it. It's the fact that you did see it and you're taking the time to comment on it. Hopefully you like it and you be nice on the Twitters. But I would definitely, you know, I don't think I would have said this a month ago, but now that we've talked, that I watched it, now that we've talked about it and really kind of dissected a little bit, which is sometimes fun, also sometimes very dangerous when people start ripping apart movies or digging in and tearing them apart. I would definitely say I bet you would enjoy it more than you think you do, even if it's just for the aspect to see all these great A-listers now in one of their first things.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely.
this movie it might surprise you. It definitely like it was surprising to me. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did, honestly. And I think now we're getting into a time where we're starting, people are starting to feel nostalgic for the 2000s. When I was growing up, everyone was nostalgic about the 80s and the 90s, and they still are now, but I'm just now kind of seeing like this kind of like resurgence of people looking back on the aughts, especially like 2000s horror, and kind of revisiting it. So I feel like this movie, along with many other movies from that decade, are gonna have its renaissance now. Like people are gonna rediscover it, and they're gonna see things that maybe the audience in the year 2000 didn't notice. So with that, my final thoughts are just, yeah, definitely watch it. I think it's really fun. If you like movies, if you make movies, if you want to make movies, it's kind of inspiring in a way. I don't know, especially at the end, when our lead, our heroine, she's got a movie deal and she's got an agent negotiating her 3 movie deal. It's just like, it's really cool to see that arc. So yeah, definitely I 100% recommend this movie.
Absolutely. I agree on everybody's fronts. I got nothing else to add to that.
Well, then with that, I think we've made it to Matt's personal favorite part of the show, although there won't be a whole lot to talk about here. But we usually have Matt rank this movie on like the TNA meter, because 9 times out of 10, we're watching some schlocky B movie from the 70s or the 80s that's full of like a half naked person running around. But in this case, I feel like I could almost answer for you and say you're going to give it like a hmm. I feel like you would rate this like 1 Matthew Davis butt cheek out of 10, because that's really all we got going on in this one.
All right, so
Yeah,
look.
but it's Matthew Davis's budget.
Exactly.
All right, look, Katie, you know me all too well. You just about nailed it. However, this is my rundown. Are you ready? We get
Yeah.
one Matthew Davis ass. We get Jennifer Morrison in granny panties, and we get Eva Mendez with pokey nipples through braless shirt. So I'm going to give Urban Legends Final Cut a 1.5 star out of 10 on the TNA meter.
All right. Well, that's fair then.
Maybe a little bit too fair. All right, well, guys, that's all we have for this episode of Video Express. We want to thank our special guest, Andre Gower, for joining us on tonight's episode.
This was absolutely fun,
Awesome.
and I know I'm never getting invited back.
No, you're welcome back on literally any time that you're willing to come on. I've loved talking to you about this movie. I've loved just having our little roundtable discussion. So it means a lot to have you on the show. And I don't want to get too corny here at the end, but I did want to just like dedicate this episode to my big brother Adam, because he's 12 years older than me. And he is the person who showed me Monster Squad as a kid. He showed me Pumpkinhead and Aliens and Predator and all of these great horror movies. And he's really the person who like sparked this love of horror and monsters with me. So I very likely would not be doing this show if it were not for him. So I just wanted to give him a little shout out, and also just thank you again, Andre, for being on the show with us today.
Well, thanks for the invite. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I enjoyed doing this. And if later in the future, if someone bails out on you the last minute, let me know. I'll fill in and be another gas bag fill in. But no, I think that's an interesting story. I'm glad you brought it up. Most people are kind of reticent sometimes about telling stories like Adam, or your gateway to something. But that's what's interesting about the kind of the impact and legacy of Monster Squad. That's what we tried to kind of capture in Wolfman's Got Nards. It's not about the doc's not about the movie. It's not about us. It's about how something like a movie can impact people, and it's the stories like Katie and her brother Adam. And so, look, shout out to Adam. That's awesome, and that's kind of interesting, because it's very unique to be involved and attached to something like Monster Squad with the legacy that it has, because the conversations usually sound the same, but they're all different, but they don't end.
Yeah.
And this thing has a connection with people that is very, very interesting, and that's what we were trying to interrogate in the documentary. And I think we touched on it at least a little bit in there.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen it, hope you enjoy it. If you did see it and you didn't like it, that's okay too. But we were trying to convey exactly that sentiment, like, Katie, had with her brother about learning about these things and then enjoying it for the next 20 years.
Yeah, I got the chance to watch Wolfman's Got Nards the other day, and I absolutely loved it. It, brought a tear to my eye on more occasions than I expected it to, in a good way though. And so, if any of our listeners, if they want to check out Wolfman's Got Nards, or if they want to, just check, like, see what else you're working on, where should they go?
Kind of the usual haunts. I'm mostly on the social medias, on Instagram at Andre Gower official. I'm on the Twitter verse at Andre Gower. And then please, if you're interested in the doc, it's at the Squad Doc on both of those, or squaddoc.com. If you're in the US or Canada, you can you can rent it or digitally download it on one of dozens of different platforms, including iTunes and Dish Network, things like that. Um, if you're a physical media person, you can actually order a Blu-ray, which is pretty rad, because there's a lot of fans that have it on their collection on the shelf right next to all their other Monster Squad stuff. And if you're international, I hope you have some kind of international listeners here. Good news there. You are actually the first podcast thing that I get to announce, even though we're a little in the future, because we recorded this a little bit earlier than the air date, but we have just uh, signed our international sales agency agreement, and so now Wolfman is loose globally and at different film markets. And so, if you're international, your wait is not going to be much longer.
Awesome. All right, so here's the thing. I'm a diehard Monster Squad fan, always have been since I was a little kid. I've even built a shrine in my man cave dedicated to the Monster Squad. So I had to get the leader of the goddamn squad on the show, right? But here's the thing. I've been to so many screenings. I know Ashley. I've worked with Ashley. I've asked her a million questions, and I've met you guys at the Alamo and stuff. So here's the thing. I'm going to have you on this show. Am I going to ask you Monster Squad questions? No, Andre. I've got two questions for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Michael Landon or Victor French?
Michael Landon, although Victor French has good jokes and funny handshakes.
All right. Uh, sorry, I just got tickled. Was Jenny Beck a bitch on T.J. Hooker?
No, super awesome. It was my uh, that's a good one. It's a great show to be on, and I remember working with Jenny. I think we actually worked on something else as well, a commercial or something when we were kids. She was that perfect, cute, blonde head American daughter that is insert the perfect kid here, and it's Jenny Beck. And and then she gets kidnapped in an episode, so we're all worried, right? The which is funny if you want to talk about TJ Hook. I hadn't seen William Shatner in decades, and we're at the same convention. You brought it up, dude. You're getting the story.
I love it. I love it.
And so I hadn't seen Shatner. I haven't seen Shatner in literally like probably 30 years at this point. And we're in the green room, and he's sitting there I think he's sitting there talking to Alice Cooper, who I ended up talking golf with, and we were reading the same Jack Reacher book at the same time. So that was cool, Alice Cooper. And so I waited, and I said, Mr. Shatner, I just wanted to. Sorry to interrupt your salad, but I just want to say hello. I'm actually signing 2 rows over for you at this convention. My name's Andre, but we actually worked together. I was your son on TJ Hooker. And Shatner, in a very Shatner way, just kind of stared at me and goes, I had a son on TJ Hooker. And so I went, yeah, you did. I did like 4 episodes. And then the show got canceled and they got rid of the kids, but I was still in a cut. Never mind. And,
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
and then I'll be damned, like 4 months after that, I was eating lunch before playing golf out in Thousand Oaks, and he was sitting in the same Mediterranean place. And I went and said hi to him again, and he was like, "Oh yeah, hey, how's it going?" It's this kid that said he was my son who doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. But yes, Jenny Beck, awesome, not a bad person at all, delightful. And I think I remember this might do your TNA scale better if you were doing TJ, because the very first shot I think we ever did It was either the second day or first day I was over on the show, was the scene where we come in the house and Heather Locklear comes down the stairs in a towel.
Oh,
Fantastic.
And we're like, wait, what is happening here?
that's amazing. All right, one last question here. Are you ready? George Peppard.
Yeah.
Did he take himself too seriously on the set of A-Team?
No, but you definitely knew he was the guy. You know, he was like the veteran, super old school Hollywood film actor that was doing a cheesy TV show where these guys are supposed to be crack special forces and never hit anybody that they're aiming at. But no, he was certainly nice and professional, but I don't think it was one of those things where he really gave a shit about hanging out with me. Now, Mr. T was a different story. He was super, considerate, super, because obviously kids are always enthralled with Mr. T, although he scared the shit out of me as Clubber Lang, but then he became Mr. T. A-Team is better. B.A. Baracus is much more jovial, but he was super nice, considerate. George, you could just tell he was sort of that kind of old Hollywood guy. Super
Right.
nice, professional, just came in, did the scene, worked with you. We were in the same shots, so that's kind of cool. And if at that time, I don't really know who he is with his legacy and his history, but years later, you understand that more and you're like, oh, that's pretty
Right.
rad. I was just a fan of Mr. T and Dwight Schultz at the time. And of course, Dirk Benedict, because he was Starbuck on the original Battlestar Galactica. Um,
Absolutely, yeah.
but I was a fan of the show. I was a fan of the show before you act on it, so that's just cool. But no, I mean, Papard and Bert. I mean, what a great ensemble cast for a show that never should have gone past the pilot. But it's everybody's favorite thing.
Are we the first podcast to ask you questions on not only Highway to Heaven, T.J. Hooker, but also A-Team?
No, no, and no.
There you
Damn.
go.
Damn.
Hey, that just means that there were some other people on the same wavelength as you, Matt.
I
That's right.
guess so.
And you're just showing your age.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Showing your age is all you're doing.
I
Because
show
I'm
it
over
every
here
episode.
like I turned 30 this year, and I'm like I haven't seen any of these shows, guys.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Katie, just turn on cozy TV or Me TV and just
Yes.
watch all that, and
Yes,
you'll see
that's the
Knight
channels.
Rider and Remington
Yeah.
Steele and T.J. Hooker and A-Team, all
Which you were on
Twilight
Knight
Zone,
Rider
all shows
too,
I've been on.
right? Where you were on Knight Rider as
I
well,
did
right?
do a Knight Rider, yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's correct. I'll give you one TV nostalgia story for you again, because we might as well hit the 3-hour mark. I did an episode of the new Twilight Zone, and I did it with Bradford May, who was the DP of Monster Squad, and a TV writer who was directing his first thing named JD Fiegelson, who's still a really cool dude. He made the movie The Night of the Scarecrow with Larry Drake. If you've ever seen that old school TV movie. And it was this a Ray Bradbury. Yeah, it was a Ray Bradbury short story called The Burning Man, and it's me, and I think I'm 11, and two older people. And these two older people that are in this episode with me, I recognize the older guy because I've seen him in a ton of stuff, but I don't know really who he is. And the lady that's playing my aunt is obviously very. I mean, she just had sort of this aura and this regalness to her, and this kind of history to her. And people were treating her not with kid gloves, but was just very reverent and admirable. And I'm sitting around going, yeah, she's just this lady that I cast as my aunt. And then I know her name. I know the other guy's name, and I don't realize that I'm 11 years old doing a Ray Bradbury story for the fucking Twilight Zone, starring Roberts Blossom and Piper Laurie.
Oh
And
my
I'm going,
God.
oh, that was a really cool experience. 4 or 5 years later, when I realized who these people are, like I watched The Hustler and Carrie, and you're like, oh shit.
That's amazing. That's
So
awesome.
that's what happens when you're a TV kid, and then you get to work with a lot of cool people.
That's a great story. Well, Andre, we want to thank you once again for coming on the show and talking some movies with us. But we also want to thank our sponsor, the Alamo Drafthouse of Winchester, Virginia. The Alamo Drafthouse celebrating cinema of yesteryear and today, featuring a wide variety of beer and adult beverages, as well as a rotating menu of delicious foods. Alamo Drafthouse Cinema elevates the cinematic experience with their commitment to exceptional picture and sound. Catch the latest blockbuster or your favorite cult film at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia at 181 Kernstown Commons Boulevard.
Yeah, shout out to Alma Draft House. They're awesome. Also, thank you for everyone for listening tonight. If you have thoughts about Urban Legend, Final Cut, if you want to suggest another movie for us to cover, or if you just want to drop by and say hi, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Video Express Pod.
All right, guys. Well, thanks again for tuning in and hanging out with us tonight at Behind the Video Store. Until next time, just remember, please be kind, rewind, but most importantly, just be kind. I'm Matt.
And I'm Katie.
And I'm Andre.
And one more thing. Hey, Andre, we've been talking for a couple of hours. Do you think we could be in the Monster Squad? Can we be in the club?
Katie, Matt, you are definitely in the goddamn club.
Yes. Awesome.
Yes.
Well, that's more than we could ever dream of.
Your business cards are at FedEx right now.
Fantastic. I expect them on my desk by Monday.
And we'll catch you on the next episode of Video Express.
Wolfman's got nards.
Who will stand up for the right?